Hey
Okay.
everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the game show. That's what we're calling it for now. Probably not for that long, but that's what it's called for now. This is a show run by me, Max, and my friend Caleb. We're here to talk about games. We're here to talk about gaming news, upcoming games, what we're playing, talking back and forth with each other, and hopefully other people talking about what we like about gaming and what we want to see happen in the future. So really, let's just start with myself, and then Caleb can jump in. I've kind of been interested in video games as far back as like age 6, I'd say. Starting out with games like Webkins and Club Penguin, and then moving on to stuff like Call of Duty and Halo. Those games really fostered me growing up, and then I've kind of moved into more creative stuff. I played a lot of Gary's Mod as a kid. I think Gary's Mod was a huge inspiration for me because it was like this virtual world with so many different games in it. I poured so many hours into Gary's Mod, and that kind of inspired me to find new games, not only just multiplayer games, but also branching out into single player games. And then very recently, with the pandemic, Caleb and I both got PS5s, and I'd say that's where we both, or he got a PS4, I got a PS5 because I'm better than him. Um, and
That's true.
we both started kind of enjoying our single player renaissance, as you'd call it, playing new games like from software games and other single player games. I think have really inspired us and engaged us more recently.
Very cool. Wow, I've never played Gary's mod. That's like a Counter-Strike mod, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like based off the Source
Oh.
engine, Half-Life 2, and it's
Right.
supposed to be like a sandbox game. You just have different tools to build stuff with, but it also has a multiplayer component where people can upload servers where you can connect and play custom game modes. There's all sorts of stuff on there, and it's really been a huge inspiration for the Source community overall because you have
Hmm.
stuff like Prop Hunt and Trouble in Terrorist Town, which is like the prototype version of Among Us,
Well,
but with guns. It's actually really
okay.
fun.
Hmm.
You have a bunch of role playing mini games. It's all sorts of stuff on there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of good ways to make community around that game.
I can't believe that it's been like maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute of recording, and we've already mentioned Among Us.
We've already hit the
Uh,
record.
we're now we're making real money, baby. Hello, my name is Caleb, aka Sparkling Caleb on the internet. I yeah, largely like lifer casual gamer, but took a pretty long break after I left home to go to college, or as Max would say, university, and then sort of had a career in the arts, in sort of other miscellaneous stuff, and yeah, since COVID, the COVID era beginning, I have gotten back into video games. So there's a fair amount of nostalgia for me involved, but also um, I when I was in graduate school, I took a aesthetics class that was about like how to consider games as artwork and how do we consider games in an ethical framework. So I also sort of have a lot of new thoughts on them from that experience as well. So um, yeah, mostly my experiences like early on with platformers, like early favorites, Ratchet and Clank, even going back before that, like I had a lot of when I was a kid. I had a lot of like humongous entertainment games. I don't know if that rings any bells for you, but I was a big
I've
like
never heard of
Spy
that before.
Fox. Oh yeah, they're just like all two-dimensional, just drawn, essentially like moving between like pre-drawn spaces, and then it's basically like a cartoon that you play through. Um,
It's called an edutainment game. I like that.
yeah, they're all like vaguely educational for like logic or whatever, but
These look
they
like
often have
I,
like
these look like stock images in a donkey video. These are
yeah,
not real.
exactly. Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's they definitely like looking at them now. They just look like so generic. It's crazy. But I remember being yeah, very into those. And then yeah, similarly like getting Halo. I had Halo actually for Mac, which you might not believe, but it ran like a dream, and I like
Yeah, it
could
was
play
originally going to
multiplayer
be
on it and
a
stuff.
Apple game. That was what they were making, and then Microsoft
Mm-hmm.
snatched it up.
Yeah,
Pretty
actually,
crazy turn of events in history, I'd say.
the studio where they developed Halo is actually right down the street from where I live now, which is
Really, we're
crazy.
gonna
So
have to
yeah, I
break
like
in there and force one of the employees to do an interview with us.
yeah, I should. I don't. I doubt they're in that space anymore. But I should do an episode where I record from like out on the at that building or whatever. But I like bike by it when I like go to work and stuff. Um, yeah. And other big games, yeah, I guess like Knights of the Old Republic, um, other miscellaneous. I mean, whatever, just like lots of classic PlayStation 2 stuff. And then yeah, I took about like a 10-year break between roughly like 2010 and 2020. But yeah, now also similarly like From Software, and then like Hideo Kojima stuff. So like in COVID, I played through Bloodborne and just all the Metal Gear Solid games except for the first one.
Yeah. I
For
think
some
it's
reason.
I don't want to speak for you, but I think we can both say that if it weren't for the From Software Kojima sphere of games, I don't think either of us would be nearly as interested in doing this podcast as we would otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. That's like where my like primary interest in gaming lies for sure. But I mean, there's like other stuff about it that I like, and I certainly play games that are not from those people. So
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
That's what we're
that
here
is
for, right?
definitely where we're coming from. Yeah, I mean,
Finding
yeah,
those
I'm
gems.
trying to expand my horizons,
Your Horizon Zero
and
Dawn,
make
exactly. That's the first game we're playing.
yeah, and hell yeah. Oh my god, it's yeah. So
Unless you're a
most
Linux user, in which
Xbox
case, fuck
games,
you.
most Xbox games are basically just on both. They're on PC
Yeah,
and
that's
Xbox.
exactly it. Yeah, we'll talk
Oh,
about
that
that a
makes
bit
sense.
in like a second,
I
actually, because
see.
I have a whole
I
Xbox
see.
segment planned. We're gonna have Phil
Okay.
Spencer on to talk about it.
The X segment, the weekly X
Yeah,
zone.
the X Zone, exactly. That's what we're calling it
Uh
from
huh.
now on.
But zone spelled with an X, I guess. So it's like the.
Zone.
All right. Never mind. Just the zone. Yeah. The zone.
This is a really good podcast. Don't
Yeah.
click away, guys. I promise it gets good.
This is really where this is the peak, really. So if yeah. Damn, that sucks because I was even just considering getting the like higher tier for a couple months because they have
Yeah.
like a bunch of PS3 stuff that I wanted to check out. But if it's going to
Not
be even
anymore.
more expensive, then I'm definitely not going to.
Yeah, and it's even worse for regional pricing. Like Canada, this is like costing $200 now. It's just insane.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just I think with regional pricing in mind, Canadians, Australians, pretty much anyone in like the Western world outside of America is going to be even more screwed now.
Mm.
So I think it's gonna like really hurt their international reach. I don't know how
Hmm.
long it's gonna take for them to reverse this decision, if at all. They might just tank the loss and just they make more money off the people that stay. It could work
Hmm.
out for them.
Yeah. Now, when is I guess if they keep selling PlayStation 5s like hotcakes, then it's fine. Now, what is Justin Trudeau going to do about this? Is he going to put pressure on
Good
Sony at
question.
all, or
This is it's
keep
actually is like a
Canadians
political
gaming?
reality that the CRTC has recently pursued legislation in terms of like Canadian news, I think, slash Canadian content on
Mm-hmm.
social media sites to like
Mm.
regulate how much American slash international news Canadians see on stuff like YouTube or Facebook.
Oh, so it's basically like Radio CanCon, but applied now to
They
social media in
want
general.
Canadian legislation wants or Canadian broadcasting regulations wants Canadian content on Canadian versions of these sites, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so I mean, they could potentially try to pull something like that for gaming, but honestly, I don't see the political reach of it. I don't see there being like enough of a political motive. I don't think gamers hold that much power in terms of constituency.
Mm.
We need to organize more,
Gamers
get
rise
our
up.
power, get our
Are
voices
there
heard.
are there other countries that have stuff like CanCon rules, or is that like unique?
I don't know that much about other countries,
Huh.
honestly. I mean, I only follow like North American news, to be honest. There's probably some stuff in the
Mm.
EU where they like. Obviously, EU is like a huge tech regulatory body. Most of the modern privacy and standards regulations that we enjoy today are mostly attributed to the EU in terms of like them regulating big tech companies. So I'm sure they got some stuff going on like that, but I think I don't see there being a argument that Sony has like a legal obligation to charge less for their subscription model because
Yeah.
if you don't like it, you just go somewhere else, right? It's not like they don't really like technically hold a monopoly, even though like for most people they don't want to have to like switch to a different console to pay less for a subscription model.
Mm.
Because if we're being
Now,
honest, other companies are also raising their models too. Like Nintendo and Xbox are also absolutely raising their prices. Game Pass did that like a few weeks ago too.
I see. Is
Not
that
nearly
like
as dramatically as PS Plus, but yeah.
has gaming just continued to increase in popularity like since the pandemic, or has there been like
I
a
mean, yeah,
has there
that's
been
part
like
of
a
it.
gradual shift downwards in popularity since things have started to open back up again?
I think there's definitely, I mean, the market definitely shows that it is becoming more popular. I mean, to what
Hmm.
extent though is like it's like traditional AAA gaming a part of that though, because a lot of that is more like mobile gaming is
Yeah.
like the hugest segment by a long shot. So like, yeah, I'm
Mm.
not sure you can
Mm.
really say that Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo really represent the full picture anymore. So
I
yeah,
see.
gaming is definitely more popular, but to say that it's only like traditional console gaming or traditional PC gaming necessarily, it's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my Final Fantasy mobile tactics
There's like
game.
fucking a billion of them now. There's so many mobile games from Final Fantasy. Like that, I'm
I
so
did.
soured on the whole Final Fantasy VII remake thing because it's like that entire project was just an excuse for them to turn like a bajillion mobile games out of it. God damn, it just
Yeah.
never stops. Every single like
I
game show is just like they announce like Final Fantasy VII trailer and then they show like three mobile games after it.
Yeah, it's so sick. Uh,
Anyway,
I
yeah, we have Sony being dickheads. We also have Xbox kind of being dickheads, not so much.
wait. I have one
So
more
yeah,
question.
yeah,
I have one
yeah.
more
Let's keep
question about
going.
Canada. Now, if we had like a CanCon rule about gaming, what game studios are like famously Canadian, or they're not like
Ubisoft is like the
really?
big one that comes to mind.
Oh, Ubisoft is Canadian. Oh,
There,
can
I
you
wouldn't
imagine a
call it. I
world
don't know. It's
where?
hard to say that in like good faith. They are headquartered in Canada, I think,
Uh,
but yeah, they're
okay,
everywhere now. They're like they have
I see.
studios
I
in like
see.
pretty much every major country. They're so huge. So I don't
All
know.
right, I will allow you to continue with the segue now.
Okay, so segueing over
Please carry
to
on.
Phil Spencer. Phil, do you have anything to say about your weird ass rules around cloud and Game Pass? Phil? No. Okay, Phil
Well,
has no comment at
Max.
this time.
Well,
Oh,
Max, it
never
all
mind. Phil's
started
here.
when my parents gave me two first names, and since then I've just sort of never been able to be a regular guy.
Okay. All right, Phil Spencer. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Always a
You're
pleasure to have you,
welcome.
Phil. So yeah,
Yeah.
the first big news is that obviously we've been hearing about this Xbox Activision acquisition shenanigans for months
Ooh.
now.
Ooh.
Do you know much about this, Caleb?
I don't know about this at all, but I have been reading about the history of Activision because they were originally like Atari programmers who split off and became one of the first ever like independent studios that wasn't owned
Yeah,
by
and fun fact,
like a
the
developer.
reason they chose the name Activision is because AC is like pretty high up on like the alphabet, so it just helped them to get more recognition when people search for
Incredible.
game studios.
Yeah, I just think of them and EA as the two like dumbest studios, but I guess that's maybe not fair to Activision because they're like
I mean,
li-
Activision Blizzard at least is like the monolithic classic games studio in the truest sense
yeah.
of the word. They made World of Warcraft, they made all the
Right.
Diablo games, they
Wait, are
made
they the same company, Blizzard and Activision?
Activision is like the publishing arm, and then Activision Blizzard is like the studio that makes the games.
Oh,
I
okay. I
think.
see. I
I don't
gotcha.
understand how the full mechanisms of how it works, but yeah, Activision definitely
I
publishes a
see.
lot of games they don't that Blizzard does not make, but Blizzard is the studio that Activision owns that makes
Mm.
most of the games that they're known
Mm-hmm.
for.
I see. I gotcha. And so
But
Xbox is
yeah,
gonna buy Activision.
yeah, they want to buy.
Whoa.
I think they want to buy Activision. I'm not sure if it's. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Xbox, Activision. I don't. Yeah, I'm 95% sure it's. Yeah.
Damn.
Okay. It's just Activision. So
They
they
saw
get
how well that.
Activision, the publishing company, and then also Activision Blizzard, the studio, with all their games.
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah, obviously, like the biggest games acquisition in history. That's which is why it's been in the news for so long. It's been taking
Hmm.
Microsoft forever to pull it off because
Hmm.
Microsoft just has mountains of money to throw at games acquisitions. Like Sony is
Hmm.
just playing in the little leagues in comparison. So yeah,
Wow.
Xbox owning Activision would be bigger than Bethesda, bigger than Bungie, bigger than any other acquisition in history. It's like they're basically bigger than Nintendo. It's like they're just so huge. So yeah, that's why every single regulatory body has been challenging it to some extent, more so in
Hmm.
the UK than the US. So yeah, what
Hmm.
happened in the UK was the UK's like regulatory body on competition basically said that you cannot do this acquisition because acquiring Activision Blizzard would lead to less competition in the cloud gaming industry. Not gaming, just cloud gaming. This is the one thing got held up on, was this super niche thing that nobody uses.
The first cloud
Which
type
I can
game.
understand why. This isn't actually too crazy to me. When I first heard about this was a few months ago now, or maybe like a month ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
This seemed outlandish to me that the UK regulatory body would pursue Microsoft on this one thing, but it actually does make sense because cloud gaming is to some extent the future. Like I think as broadband speeds become more modernized and more people have access to fast internet, there's going to be more of a market for gamers that want to play games without having to own super expensive gaming hardware. So, already, I think consoles already continue to be successful because they're so affordable, but even more so is like, you don't have to pay $500 for a console plus online subscription. You just pay for the subscription and you can play the games on your smart TV. So I think, in the future, that's going to become more and more appealing to gamers. So I can understand why the UK would want to pursue that. But yeah, it's basically it's been the thing that's been holding up this deal for a while. And also there's the FTC deliberations slash not really trial. It's not the right word. It's just like a hearing, I guess. Microsoft explaining how this deal is not going to fuck over gamers. Totally Kappa. It will, but that's okay.
I gotta watch some of that.
They got the money for it. I haven't actually watched it. It's not that interesting, but I just read the headlines about it. So yeah. But yeah, the UK is like the main thing holding this deal back, from my understanding, because the US is basically giving it the go ahead. So Xbox has recently announced that in order to accommodate the UK's requirements around competition in the cloud gaming industry, they're basically saying that any Activision Blizzard titles that get made in the future will not be published on Xbox's cloud service, xCloud or whatever it's called. It'll be published on Ubisoft's cloud service, which is weird. I don't know how Ubisoft got involved, but Ubisoft's another huge player. They basically said that they chose a third party that they feel they can trust to publish cloud titles for the next 15 years. So this is the deal they've proposed to the UK. And I think 15 years is actually a pretty long time. I mean, it doesn't sound that bad in the grand scheme of things for only one studio. But, as cloud gaming becomes more popular, I think this might come to bite Xbox in the ass. Because I think they're going to be trying to penetrate the cloud market the most out of any of the major game companies. Because it kind of represents their brand motif, right? Trying to let gamers have options, right? That's basically Phil Spencer's whole motto.
Yeah, right.
So not having their biggest studios games on their cloud service is going to definitely hurt them. So I think it is a pretty big sacrifice, but obviously I guess it's a worthwhile one because having Activision under their wing would be huge.
Yeah, for sure. That seems like it probably is worth it. Because I mean, they'll still see all of the profits from the games that do get sold via that marketplace or whatever. So
they still get all the profits from the games. I mean, Ubisoft obviously gets a share of them too, but yeah.
Yeah. Right, not all.
I don't think it would be that bad either way, because I mean, at the end of the day, you could still use. It's not. I guess exclusivity in the cloud industry concerns me less than exclusivity in the hardware industry, because anyone can access cloud services. You just pay for the subscription, whereas you have to pay for hardware with non-cloud gaming. But I personally, fine.
I can never imagine a future in which I buy like a smart TV, let alone am like using it to play games on.
Yeah, so, I would never consider a smart TV as a purchase. It just seems like I'm throwing money away.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like maybe doing a disservice to like more casual people who like would want to be using a smart TV to game on, where in theory there could be like a more open marketplace like when it's first starting out. But so it's kind of just setting up this like large future market for like a near monopoly on it in the future. But at the same time, it's like it means that there will be access to like Activision Blizzard games, which is cool because that's like, those are the guys. Not that I'm like interested,
games. Rightly so.
Not really interested in many of those games. Although I did recently buy the Tony Hawk Pro Skater remasters.
Amazing. I actually did buy that too. I haven't played it yet.
Yeah, I mean haven't played it yet. For me, I mean it's like 90% nostalgia value for me, but those games are just funny because like the farther you progress in them and like the skill level that's demanded, what you see on screen just increasingly deviates from what skateboarding can ever look like in real life, which is sort of to me the funniest aspect of it.
Final
But
level,
they
outer
are,
space.
yeah, they are still very fun. I mean, I'm sure you'll like tear through them immediately. It's like if you can like press buttons the
I
right way,
mean,
then
yeah, I could see that. I don't know. I've never played a skateboarding game before. I used to watch this game called Skate, which is a Ubisoft game, and it was
oh
like
yeah,
famous on YouTube because it was like had the funniest ragdoll physics where you could like
mm-hmm.
throw your guy off like a bend and he would just crash into railing and his limbs would like.
Sick. Yeah, I think I've
Anyway,
seen some
I
of that.
love watching like the classic Let's Play YouTubers play those games. It was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never really had a history with Tony Hawk though, so I'm interested in trying the remakes.
Yeah, I mean they are. I definitely I got a kick out of playing the music in them. I mean the original soundtrack
Yeah, I
is
know the
like
soundtrack is
iconic,
classic,
and
yeah, but that's
all
probably
the
why
new.
it took them so long to remake them because the licensing was probably all over the place, right?
I think so. Yeah. Well, there is a whole thing about why, because I think the most recent Tony Hawk game before the remakes like was famously like extremely bad and poorly received, and then like I think someone sold the license to it for that reason because it was so shitty. And then I think that was the opportunity for them to be able to remake it. But
Nice. Same thing with The Witcher,
then,
where it's like all the Witcher
oh,
games are based off this book series, and they paid the author
mm-hmm.
like $1,000 for the rights to it because the author didn't think the game would make any money. So he was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
I just give me my payout, and you can fuck
Mm-hmm.
off." And they made 3 games off, and it's like a multi-million-dollar franchise now with its own Netflix TV show. So
With
that
a TV
author
show.
is crying every day.
But then, so they put all this new music in it too, and it's very, very bad and very funny. So
Oh no.
it's
You just
hilarious.
gotta,
To
it's the
just
sort of
see,
game where you
like,
just like play Spotify in the background, right? And you just have music muted in game.
yeah, basically. Well, okay. They put in a bunch of rap music, which is pretty good, but then all the like punk quote unquote music they put in is like hilarious and very embarrassing. Um,
Yeah.
you just simply love to see it. All right, where were we? All right,
Yeah, so we were talking about the cloud, Xbox's like cloud strategy basically.
the
And
X Cloud.
I guess it kind of calls into question like, is the Xbox console brand even worth it anymore from like Microsoft's standpoint? They've already invested so much money
Right.
into this whole, gamers have options model where all their
Mm-hmm.
games are coming out on PC on their Game Pass model. And it's like, there's no reason to buy an Xbox anymore. Like, obviously, gaming PCs are more expensive, but I think in the long run, like,
Mm,
if all of your games can, like, come to PC anyway, I think most gamers are going to prefer to just, like, have a gaming PC they can also use for, like, work and everything
nah,
else. That's not just, like, an Xbox
I
machine
don't think
that has no
so.
exclusive games.
I think people. I think like people. Maybe it's going to be generational, but I think people will still want to like have it like what's the word I'm looking for? Like divided up. You know what I mean? Compartmentalized. Like I think people will still buy like here's my gaming machine that I
Yeah.
use just for gaming and maybe also for Netflix, and then like because I mean. Most people are not going to get like PCs that can game in any serious capacity. That is niche. That is like not.
I mean,
don't think that's
definitely with
common.
new games,
Most
that's more of
people
a
have
problem
Macs.
because
You know what I mean?
the all the new games that are coming out have like ridiculous hardware requirements. But I think for most gamers, I think they don't really care about
Yeah.
the new AAA games that much. I think most people just want to play like Madden or Call of Duty. And I think for those people, Xbox definitely makes sense. But it's like you
Yes.
look at the
For
numbers
sure.
and it's like PlayStation 5 sales are skyrocketing
Yeah.
and Xbox's hardware sales are down a lot these last 2 generations in comparison. So I mean, it's kind of like Microsoft is. I
That's
think
true. Well,
Microsoft
yeah. I mean,
is deliberately or unintentionally on this path towards not having Xbox as like a
Yeah.
hardware model anymore. And I think that's why they're starting to invest more in
That makes
cloud, and
sense.
it's why
Yeah. I mean, I
the
guess.
UK is probably pressing them on it more.
Yeah. I think it's like what I mean by that isn't that Xbox specifically has a future. I think like consoles in general.
Yeah, consoles
Like.
absolutely, because I think
Yeah.
stuff like the
Yeah.
Switch, especially Nintendo, is in the best position because they've successfully compartmentalized their
Yeah.
brand away from like regular electronic hardware, whereas the PS5 and Xbox are very often compared to PCs. Nintendo's always maintained the position that Switch is like its whole other thing. It's like specifically like a handheld game machine, and you play all of our games on it. So Nintendo's
Yeah.
definitely in the most resilient position. Xbox has the least sort of like protection from the whole like oncoming PC/cloud
Mm-hmm.
torrent, and then PlayStation's kind of in the
Mm.
middle, I'd say, where they still maintain like kind of like brand exclusivity or brand value, and
Yeah.
also a lot of people are criticizing them more for not being more open, so they're kind of being torn from both sides, but they're still,
Mm.
I can foresee a position for them in the future, not so much with Xbox.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think
But yeah, I
that
mean,
seems right.
Microsoft, as I said before, Microsoft just has fuck you money, so they can just do whatever they want. Basically, they're not really going to
Yeah.
suffer regardless because they can just keep throwing money at their projects. They
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
all these studios now. They're going to be making all these games, and all that money is going to go right back to Microsoft, whether or not they're exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was just thinking about it before, like even though I mean, it's obviously more appealing if you can have gamers on your ecosystem, because then it's not just the games that they own from the studios that they own. It's
Mm-hmm.
also like all the games, because all the games are bought through their store page, which they get a cut of them,
Mm-hmm.
which is I think is obviously more appealing than putting all your games on Steam, which is what Xbox kind of has to do because nobody wants to buy games on PC if they're not on Steam.
Totally. What are you going to use the Epic
But
game
yeah,
launcher?
if I was running Microsoft, I'd rather have people buying Xboxes and buying games on the Microsoft store because then I get a cut of the
For
money.
sure. For sure. Um,
But yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean,
they might
also
decide that's not possible.
Sony is like, I mean, I don't know entirely how this works, but I mean, Sony has like all of these other like Microsoft basically has like they have like PC stuff, they have Windows, they have Xbox, they have like it's much more niche, whereas Sony is like has massive shell elements where or like holding elements where they have like they are one of the biggest music record labels in the world. They like they're one of the biggest like film production distributor companies in the world too. Like they've got like their hands in way more diverse like media shit. So it might be that like they don't need to be as invested in like wringing as much money out of gaming as possible as long as they have like a solid stake in it. Like they're one of the big three companies that is like making money off of games. That might just be like enough for them, and they don't feel like they have to like have as much of like a big monopoly over like a whole sector of gaming. You know what I mean? That's my
Yeah,
hypothetical idea of like why Sony would not like
I think
whatever.
fundamentally, I mean, I think Nintendo's existence in the gaming industry is always going to be a good thing, regardless of Nintendo's
Yeah,
shitty practices as a
for
company.
sure, for
It's
sure.
always good to have a company like Nintendo that is willing to penetrate like different markets and not just do like only mainstream appeal, because Nintendo can
Mm,
target like more niche audiences like kids games, like
yeah.
the family oriented aspect, and also just like more unique artistic games like platformers,
Mm-hmm.
Pikmin RTS type games, racing
Yeah.
games, all that stuff that's not necessarily being targeted by Sony or Microsoft Studios. They
Mm-hmm.
kind of are, but
Mm-hmm.
not nearly to the same extent or success that Nintendo is.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Well,
So
or at
yeah,
the
I
very least,
mean,
it's like
you go
Nintendo is
first.
just known for that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of how
Exactly.
widespread it is across them, they've managed to like make that a huge part of their brand image.
Yeah, and because they're known for that, it kind of like keeps Microsoft and Sony in check because they can't just
Mm-hmm.
like try to monopolize the entire market.
Mm-hmm.
They always have to compete with Nintendo regardless because Nintendo is always going to have more resilience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, continuing on the Xbox trend, we have Starfield. We're going to talk more about Starfield the game later, but what I want to talk about right now is Starfield is kind of like Microsoft's big chess move, and if they fuck this up, it's
Mm.
going to be really bad for them because
They're a Queen's
Microsoft
Gambit.
has been like pouring so much money into Bethesda to make this game Starfield, and I'm excited. I mean, this game looks really good, but you have to wonder like if this game fails, what's going to happen to Microsoft because like their
Yeah.
entire brand image in gaming is kind of riding on this game being good. I mean, I'm confident it will be good, but it's just you have to think about what happened if people didn't like it. And I don't think that's going to happen. The worst that's going to happen is it's going to have like a really shitty monetization scheme, and people are going to be outraged over that.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that's going to happen. I haven't seen a lot of news on that. At least seems like a single player game with like a lot of polish, a lot of ideas, a lot of uh, room for for exploration and expansion. But Bethesda has been known to do shit like they have like community mods on like PC for their games, and then like on console
Yeah.
they have like their own Bethesda store where you can buy the mods made by the community
Right.
and give Bethesda money for them for when you can get them for free
Wow.
on PC.
That is horrible.
And like
Uh,
Fallout 76 with its own like unique subscription, you like Fallout bucks. You
mhm.
buy Fallout bucks to like you pay for the subscription to get more Fallout 76 content. Wow, it's so good.
Right, and isn't Fallout 4 famous for having like one of the worst, like, well, probably compared to where we are now in history, it's not as bad, but like on release, wasn't it like basically like completely bugged and like not functional?
Oh well, every Bethesda game is buggy. I mean, Skyrim and Fallout 4 were both equally buggy, I'd
Mm.
say. I
Mm.
mean, Skyrim has had like 5 re-releases and it's still not fixed all the
Yeah.
bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fallout 4 was pretty bad. I mean, like the good thing about Fallout 4 is it had manual saves, so like any sort of bug situation you got into could just be like reloaded and fixed almost immediately.
There you
Sometimes it'd
go.
be like game breaking bugs where like an NPC would just like a critical NPC would just like disappear and you could not find them anywhere. That happened to me. Like one of my companions just vanished off the face of the earth for like 3 hours. I could not find them.
They were
But
like, I'm
I really
so
enjoyed Fallout
tired
4. I
of.
never despised playing it.
Uh huh.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm excited for Starfield because I enjoyed playing Fallout 4 so much. I'm looking forward to seeing Bethesda expand on their core gameplay values and like a much more expansive premise.
For sure. I mean, it looks extremely cool. I'm very jealous that you're going to be able to play
Yeah,
it.
I don't
But
want to go too much into it. We'll talk about it more later. But yeah, start for now. Just like the main point is like, if Starfield doesn't work or it doesn't sell enough, then it's going to really hurt Xbox's brand. I think Microsoft's going to start to like reevaluate their strategy and like maybe cut some
mhm.
losses.
Yeah, like maybe be less, like let Activision Blizzard handle like their development stuff and be less like involved directly. But did you see the Twitter account? This guy who like I think used to be an Xbox
Oh yeah,
influencer
he
or
used to be.
something, but got like
He
kicked off
worked
and
on World of Warcraft. I don't want to spread misinformation. I'm gonna look this up. Get this right. Starfield.
allegedly on World of Warcraft.
Yeah, make sure to say that after before every accusation, so we don't get in trouble. Um,
Yeah, he was.
Pete
But I
Hines.
mean, I saw that.
Pete Hines
That's his
is the
name.
senior vice president at Bethesda. Wait, what does this make sense? What? No, that's the guy who that responded. Never mind. Kern. Okay,
Um,
Mark Kern, who worked on
well, what,
StarCraft, World of Warcraft, and Firefall, which I've never heard of. But yeah, he was on World of Warcraft. That's what I thought. And he was like,
oh,
"Yeah,
he worked on it.
Starfield start
Oh, whoa.
screen. Yeah, he's at Activision
Okay.
Blizzard. So it's like this is like two arms of Microsoft fighting each other.
Oh, that's crazy. Because he was posting about how he like doesn't want the deal to go through because he thinks it's like illegal or whatever.
That
If
is
we're talking
weird
about the same
because
person.
like
Well, no, I'm talking
I
about the
guess
guy
he's
who
like
like
maybe not.
he was like someone posted this like he on Twitter he was like criticizing Starfield because he was like you can't go explore and walk on the gas giant planets, and so the
I
game
think
is
that was
like
a
a
different guy.
scam.
I don't think
I no, I
Mark
think
Kern
we're
would be
talking about
stupid enough to
different
do
people.
that.
This guy was just like a he's like a streamer or something, but he like I think was like taken off the Xbox roster, so now he's like extremely anti-Xbox, and part of that has manifested in him saying Starfield is a scam because you can't go on a
I
planet
didn't
with
hear
no
about all
like
that.
solid surface.
I thought that was just some like random asshole on Twitter. I didn't realize I was like an Xbox employee.
Well, he's not an employee, but I think he like was a streamer or something who
Oh, he
like
was like an
had
ambassador.
he was a brand ambassador, but he was removed as an ambassador, so now his
Yeah.
entire
Okay.
Twitter presence is like extreme
Anti
anti-Xbox, pro
Xbox.
Sony. It's hilarious. I was getting a real kick out of like looking through looking through that.
It's funny seeing Titan on our Discord being like making fun of people for saying Starfield's going to be good. And it's like, oh, it's the funniest thing I've read all day because they said it's going to destroy PlayStation. And it's like everyone on both sides like extremely tribalistic in terms of like how this game's release reflects on the major gaming brands.
Mm.
It's honestly all pretty stupid. It's a video game. It's not that serious. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean
the big news was like Mark Kern being like, a game start screen represents how polished it is or how good it is, and it's like Starfield start screen looks
Mm,
boring, so the game must be shit. And that
mm-hmm.
started some huge
Yeah.
drama, which is crazy because it's Mark Kern is World of Warcraft, which is Activision Blizzard, and then the guy
Yeah.
who responded is Pete Hines, who was executive at Bethesda. So it's like
Ooh.
Microsoft's children fighting each other.
Incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah, anyway, it's really
I
stupid
just
drama because it's all nonsense from this get-go.
yeah.
Start screens do not reflect the quality of the game. Otherwise, FromSoftware's games would be the worst games ever.
Well, you don't like press any button.
I don't. Yeah, black screen with the logo on it. Clearly, this
Yeah.
game is bad because it has a bad start screen.
That's so sick. That's like such a. In what universe is criticizing that like going to make any sense to anyone?
Yeah, it
Um,
just
I
it's
just
just
feel
way
like
it makes it's way less. You're way less likely to get face backlash if you just say like, I think Starfield is not going to be polished enough, and like not try to like make up some weird like gotcha moment about some weird niche component of the game.
yeah. I mean, what games have been extremely hyped recently? We've had Cyberpunk, which was obviously like a complete disaster, not
What
ready.
was the big one this year?
We
I
had the
mean,
Tears of the
Redfall.
Kingdom.
Redfall was like the arcane game. This is also like tying back into the whole Xbox discussion. Redfall was like the first game from Arcane Studios, which is like a subsidiary of Bethesda, and
Mm-hmm.
they're known for making like super high quality, like immersive sim type games, like Dishonored and
Mm.
Prey, stuff like that. Those games are
Right,
known
but
for like their insane levels of polish and inventiveness. And then you had
mhm.
Redfall, which is like this generic looter shooter that that barely works, where the AI is worse than
Right.
like the original Halo one.
It was like completely broken.
Yeah, and then Phil Spencer was
Yeah.
on the record saying like this is a disappointing game.
Uh,
Anyway, there's this
ooh.
whole there's all these shenanigans in terms of like internal like reviews and QA testing, where it's like
Mm.
clearly they hired the wrong people to test this game.
Mm.
They did not get the right impression about it, about how good it was going to be when they released it. So yeah, it was very disappointing for Microsoft, and I'm kind of concerned for the future of Arcane Studios after that one. But I'm sure they'll be fine.
I'm just trying to imagine like who gets hired to test it, where they're like, "Yep, looks good." When it's like
I don't want to name
clearly,
names. I don't know
like
exactly who was
completely
it.
broken.
There was no finger pointing involved in any of those reports. But yeah, it was. I don't know how Redfall honestly made it out the door. I think anyone could have played that game and realized this is not like an arcane game. This is just like a generic like double A
Hmm.
type game that's like very lazy and uninspired.
Now when you said AAA before, I always thought that like Call of Duty and Madden are those not AAA games? What does that mean?
Also, I mean, triple A game just means like a game that's published by a publisher, in my opinion. Like it's
I
not
see.
necessarily like an reflective of budget because you can have a triple A game that's well, I mean, my statement isn't fully accurate either. It doesn't really capture the full picture because plenty of studios are like getting published by publishing companies that are not necessarily like feeding them tons of money. Like you have Devolver Digital and what's the other one? There's like two major studios that are publishing indie games. They basically like look for indie studios and publish their games to like increase
I see.
their market appeal.
But they don't really
And you
get
have
the
Big
money
Mode
out of that.
Games from Donkey, and their Donkey's
Big
studio
Mode.
is specifically publishing indie games too. So yeah, my
Exciting.
statement doesn't really fully capture the story either. But yeah, I mean, I guess anyone will just say like AAA is just indicative of like how much money is spent on the project,
Mm-hmm.
which usually means somewhere in the millions of dollars or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases.
Got it.
I
Okay.
think AAA is kind of like it's not really like a relevant term today because the span of game budgets is so much more diverse than it was 10, 15 years
Mm-hmm.
ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, Redfall was definitely a AAA game. It's developed by Arcane Studios, one of the most trusted names in
Mm-hmm.
gaming, and published by
Mm-hmm.
Bethesda, which is published by Microsoft. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to wonder how that happens. Anyway,
Yeah. But there also have been like games that have been highly anticipated, especially as like, flagship titles for different platforms that like have actually landed and have been like what they were advertised as and not like completely broken. But for some reason I can't help but imagine that on launch Starfield is going to be like a shit show.
I don't know. I mean, there's review copies out like a week earlier than the game is releasing, which is a good sign.
Yeah,
And
that
all the
is good.
reviews are saying it runs well. So we'll have to see. The problem is that I don't think we have PC game testing yet,
Mm.
which is concerning because the last game that
Mm.
released like console versions but not PC versions was Cyberpunk,
Mm-hmm.
and that was not a good. Also, like not last gen versions. Nobody got to play test the last gen versions before they released, and the last
Mm-hmm.
gen versions of Cyberpunk were really good, as everyone knows. We all remember, we all love the PS4 version of Cyberpunk that just ran
Yeah,
perfectly.
they sort of scaled it down so that it worked a lot smoother on PS4.
Yep,
Actually,
there was no pop in. All the NPC models worked flawlessly. There was no animation
yeah.
glitches.
Hmm.
Yep, it ran beautifully. Truly, that's why everyone refunded it because they loved it so much.
A lot of people were saying that actually the short loading times on PS5 were what messed it
Yeah,
up on PS5 actually. So, because it
I
didn't
hated the
actually have
PS5
enough time to
version.
load. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah. Anyway, with Starfield, it's like you got to wonder. There is all this drama about like Starfield's AMD shit. We'll talk about it a little bit. I want to focus on Xbox right now, but basically, it's on Xbox, new Xbox consoles, and on PC. And generally the vibe is that it runs really well on Xbox. It's only running at 30 FPS on next gen, which is kind of stupid in my opinion. But I guess it makes sense for the scale of the game, how much is being rendered at once
Hmm.
in terms of
Hmm.
like NPCs and textures, etc., and lighting. Um,
Yeah.
some of the gameplay trailers is like lots of pop in the environment, which is kind of concerning in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
textures scaling up in quality as you get closer to them. It's very noticeable, but
Yeah.
Elden Ring had lots of pop in too, and that game is still amazing. So
Yeah. It's not like a make or break necessarily.
it's as long as you're not looking for it, you probably won't notice it.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that
Um,
like graphics serve gameplay, not the other way around. So it
a
doesn't
lot of
like,
people are like ray tracing. I need ray tracing to be immersed, otherwise I
yeah,
can't enjoy
it's
the
like
game.
just watch a movie at that point. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
basically,
I don't know. I don't
people
like,
focus a lot more on the graphics than they do on the quality of the writing or the game design in a
yeah,
lot of cases,
I
which
don't
is
like
disappointing to
need,
see.
it's okay for me to like be reminded while I'm playing the game that I am playing a video game and
Yeah,
not be
exactly.
like, yeah, exactly. Um,
Anyone who tries to delude themselves into thinking they're not playing a video game is kind of missing the point, in my opinion.
yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
Like, you know,
all
it's
that said
the,
about the console versions of the game, I mean, it's impressive to me they got it running on Xbox Series S. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, for the console versions, it works great from what I understand. 30
mm,
FPS, which is sucks, but whatever, it's fine,
mm-hmm,
it's playable.
mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
on
it's like,
PC, we don't know that much. I don't think. I mean, I'm guessing there is review copies out there, but obviously testing the game on PC takes a lot longer than on console. You have to test different versions, different iterations of hardware, different combinations.
yeah.
Try to find the stuff that works and single out the stuff that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we can. I guess we're already on the topic. We can just talk about like the whole Starfield AMD drama. Not really drama. I guess it's kind of like just
What is
how the industry
AMD? What
is.
is that?
AMD. It is in fact a company that makes computer chips. They're the main.
Oh,
They compete in the CPU and the GPU environments. Advanced micro devices is what
oh,
they're called. So they compete with
advanced micro
NVIDIA on the
devices.
graphics card sides. They make
Okay.
graphics cards, competing with NVIDIA's graphics card lineups, which are like immensely more popular. NVIDIA controls most of the
Mm-hmm.
market for graphics cards for consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also compete on the CPU side. They're more traditionally known for their CPUs. They competed with Intel. They compete with Intel on the CPU side for desktop consumer CPUs. And
Mm-hmm.
so AMD, so kind of, I'll give you a breakdown because I know you're not familiar with this at all, or most of our audience might not be either. Um, basically, game companies have like partnership deals on PC with game studios slash games to
Mm-hmm.
publish like proprietary software enhancements for games. So upscaling, for example, upscaling tech is basically like you have a game rendering at 1080p, and then you
Mm-hmm.
use AI to upscale the image to 1440p. So it is
Mm-hmm.
rendering at 1080p, but it's being displayed on your screen at 1440p. That takes
Mm-hmm.
render load off the GPU, makes the game's frame rate smoother with
Hmm.
little loss in image quality. And this is actually
Hmm.
something that consoles use too. Pretty much like every console game ever released uses upscaling,
Hmm.
just in a
Oh
more like
wow,
hardware proprietary mode. So yeah,
that's
every game
crazy.
releasing it says like 4K. In reality, it's more like 1080p, 1440p being upscaled to 4K.
Wow, like in real
Yeah, it's
time while
not
you're
it's not
playing
something that
it.
most console gamers know about, but it is actually very common in the industry.
Whoa. Wait. So, but then how come you can make it look better on PC? Does PC also do the
Uh,
upscaling?
but yeah, everything. This is the thing, right? It depends on PC games because where on console games it's being developed for that hardware. There's like Xbox
Mm.
and PlayStation have like proprietary
Mm.
stuff for
It's
this to
standard.
upscale the games on their
Right.
platforms. But on
Right. Okay.
PC, it depends entirely on what sort of hardware the consumer has. So you have
Mm.
NVIDIA graphics cards, you have AMD graphics cards, And you have Intel graphics cards now. Intel is starting to seep into this market too, with
Yeah.
much less success. They're like a fraction of the market, like 3%. But yeah, AMD and NVIDIA both have their own proprietary, well, not proprietary. NVIDIA has their own proprietary upscaling technology called DLSS, deep learning super sampling. It's super techno.
Deep
You don't know about
learning
it. It's
super
a fancy name, so it's
sampling.
very cool.
Wow.
It's so cool.
I feel
And then
smarter just by having heard that.
and then AMD has their own upscaling tech called Fidelity FX Super Resolution. FSR. I know it's FX, bro. It's like movies. So yeah, they both have their own upscaling technology and games, and they partner or they provide these upscaling technologies to games being released on PC. So like Cyberpunk has a deal with Nvidia to use Nvidia's upscaling on Cyberpunk. So you can use, if you have an Nvidia graphics card, you can use Nvidia's upscaling.
Whoa.
But you cannot use AMD's upscaling because they don't have a deal with AMD for that
Whoa.
game.
What?
So yeah,
That's
I'm
crazy.
introducing you
Is
to
this
this whole
new?
world of PC shenanigans where it's just like,
That's crazy.
you know how console gamers have like console wars, PC gamers have like upscaler wars. This is like a whole other dynamic going on this side of the fence.
That is fucked.
I
That's
know. So
crazy.
it's really bad.
So like, yeah, you
Ideally,
just
like
if you get
it's like
Cyberpunk
it's
and
also
you
so
have
pointless because it's like it's everyone's playing on the same platform. They're all buying the game on Steam, but it's like you have like a better experience with certain graphics cards versus others on different games. Anyway, it's just how the industry is.
that's so wild.
So I basically like, yeah, some games have DLSS, some games have FSR. And what's cool about AMD, actually, I'm going to shield for AMD for a second here, is that their upscaling technology is not actually proprietary. I mean, they developed it, but it's open source. NVIDIA's
Oh.
DLSS can only be used on NVIDIA's graphics cards. If you try to run DLSS on an AMD graphics card, it's not going to work. But with FSR, you can use it on any graphics card. So NVIDIA graphics cards, AMD graphics cards, new, old, doesn't matter. It's going to work. If it's available in the game, you can use it. Some people criticize it for being like slightly lower quality than DLSS, which makes sense because DLSS is more optimized for the proprietary graphics cards it's designed to run on. But AMD can be like added to any game and be used by anyone that has PC hardware. Community can mod FSR into games, which is actually very common with emulators. FSR is very frequently used in emulator software to like upscale games from like the Switch or whatever. So yeah, that's one thing AMD does really well. And so yeah, basically all this to say, we've done this whole discussion about upscaler tech. So basically, Starfield, Bethesda announced that Starfield's when they did a video where it's like, AMD is our exclusive partner for Starfield, and it's like which is interesting because Nvidia controls like 70% of the GPU market. Most gamers own an Nvidia graphics card, which means that there will not be DLSS on the new Starfield, which is like, no, I need DLSS to upscale my games. It looks better, bro. I can't use FSR, but it's bad.
How did that deal come about? Like, is there a relationship between like
Well, there's a lot
Microsoft
of
or
different things you can
Bethesda
point to.
and
Like, so
AMD?
one thing, like a bit more background, is like AMD's graphics cards. Microsoft and Sony both use AMD tech for their graphics cards. So AMD controls like all the hardware in console games, basically.
okay.
Sony buys all the hardware from AMD, and
Okay.
Xbox does too. So that's like one factor that could be pointed to like to explain why Microsoft would choose to partner with AMD for this.
Right, they want to like take away this sort of like PC only like foothold, which is Nvidia, or like computer only. my
I mean,
computer
kind
has
of. I mean,
NVIDIA in it.
AMD is also guilty of the same things. I mean, Nvidia and AMD both do equally shitty stuff with game partnerships to put their proprietary software on these games and lock it down.
I see.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really think that's a full explanation of the issue. It's kind of just like AMD's like, hey, we'll give you money to put our software on your game and not Nvidia's.
Right.
That's basically the simplest way of describing what happens. And so, obviously this is not good for Nvidia gamers because they don't get DLSS. But on the other hand, as I said before, anyone with any graphics card can use FSR. It's not proprietary to AMD graphics cards only. So obviously people are mad that DLSS won't be on the game, but it is still not the end of the world. Because if the situation were reversed and it was like Nvidia is our exclusive partner, the game would have DLSS and AMD gamers could not use that upscaling tech on their game. So AMD gamers would have like
Oh,
an objectively worse experience with the game if it was Nvidia's way. But yeah,
so if you
with
have an
FSR,
NVIDIA
everyone gets
graphics
to benefit
card,
from it.
you can still use FSR though, right? Am I understanding
Yes,
this
that's
correctly?
why
Because it's
people
open
like
source.
AMD is because AMD
So it's
puts the effort in
okay.
to
So
make
it's
their
better
software
than
open
okay.
source.
I see. I see. Okay, that makes
I
sense. So
wouldn't
it's
say
not.
it's better.
I
It's
see what
still
you're saying.
shitty that these partnership deals exist, but it is better for everyone
Yeah,
overall because everyone gets to benefit
yeah.
from it. And whereas with
It's
Nvidia's
like
tech, it's only Nvidia gamers.
it's the better of two options, neither of which are
Yes,
like the way that things should be.
but yeah, a lot of gamers are
Mm,
mad because they prefer DLSS because it is like it is
right.
better, obviously, because it's more optimized for Nvidia's tech.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense why they'd want it. But I mean, yeah, if in this shitty environment of like proprietary technology and software, this is the best option of the two. Yes.
Yeah. I see. I
So
see. I
yeah,
got you.
there's that whole drama with that. Reddit kind of like had a meltdown over that when it got announced. Rightly
Sounds like the
so.
kind
I
of thing
mean,
that would
if I had an NVIDIA
go down
graphics
on
card, it would be
Reddit.
disappointing too. But yeah, I
Mm,
mean, these partnerships are always going to exist, and I don't think it's gonna be that bad. And I'm personally benefit from it because I have an AMD computer. Because I like
let's
AMD's
go.
graphics cards more. We can talk about that some
Hmm.
other time though. We have a whole hardware section planned. I might bring it up
Hmm.
then. But yeah, that's the whole drama with Starfield on PC.
Hmm.
And we'll see how that affects performance, how good FSR is with Starfield, and how well it runs on PCs in general. I mean, because 30
Yeah.
FPS on next gen consoles is disconcerting a little bit.
Hmm.
You want to have this game running at 60 FPS on PC, right?
Is your gaming PC in terms of its hardware lineup like compared to an Xbox? Are you like looking at generally better performance?
Oh yeah,
Like, can you
absolutely. I
handle better
mean,
performance? I guess that's the whole point of having a PC, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, it depends, right? Because the whole thing with PC is like the whole benefit of console games is that the games are optimized for a unified hardware lineup, whereas with PC, developers have to like plan for like thousands or millions of different combinations of hardware.
Right. Totally.
So it's like it's kind of just like you make the game for like this API on Windows and then just kind of pray that it works.
Hmm.
Or you
Hmm.
can just like go through and optimize for every single combination possible, which is just like a nightmare. That's why every
Hmm.
PC game has like hard like graphic settings, right? So gamers can do the legwork and fine tune the game for their hardware.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I remember having a level on Knights of the Old Republic on my Mac that like just would complete like
Would not run.
character motion would completely break down when you got to the planet, and every time that I played through the game I would forget that was going to happen. I'd have to like go back to the same forums and be like, how do I change my graphics settings to like make this playable or whatever. It
Yeah,
just
I
couldn't
had that
handle like
same
the
problem
big
going up because I
field.
had like a GeForce 480 in my old desktop computer that I used for play Gary's mod on. It could
Mm,
run Source games because Valve games are like famous for being super optimized and playable.
for sure,
But
for
like,
sure.
yeah, playing new games on that was like a nightmare.
I mean,
I
they
was
have to
never
be because
like,
they're so fast.
thankfully, I never was like enlightened to like 60 FPS growing up. I couldn't like see,
Hmm.
I never saw a game running at a smooth frame rate, so I never really like had a comparative experience like, oh no, 30 FPS is hard to look at. I like that was just
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
norm for me, so it was never a problem for me growing up. But like, yeah, after
Yeah,
I got a
right.
PS5, it's like, oh shit, games can run like super smooth now, and this looks way better. I don't want to go
Yeah,
back
I
now.
will say, like, I kind of thought that, like, Elden Ring looked a little bit worse at 60 FPS, or it looked wrong after having played it on PS4 for, like, a year or two, but definitely, like, I can't really imagine playing Armored Core 6 at, like, a lower frame rate,
No,
just because
yeah,
of, like,
I
how
would
fucking
struggle to
fast
play
it
that
is.
game on last gen consoles.
Yeah. Um,
That's definitely the sort of
but
game you want to have a high frame rate for.
I feel like a game, I mean, we used to go to the internet cafe to, like, have, like, a LAN party and play Counter-Strike, and I feel like that ran really, really fast. Uh, but that's probably because those were all like
Yeah, Counter
relatively
Strike,
like
as I said before,
optimized
Valve
for the
games are
time.
like ridiculously optimized. That's kind of why people love
Yeah.
them so much for PC games.
Mhm.
They're just
Mhm.
designed to run on anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, continuing on our Xbox crusade, we have Xbox Series S.
Our
So
Xbox
Baldur's
X
Gate 3
Sade.
came out recently,
Uh huh.
which is like the
Is
big
that an
game
Xbox
everyone's playing. It's not
Xbox
an
title
Xbox
specifically?
exclusive. It was on
Oh.
PC first. It's a
Uh
independent
huh.
studio called Larian. They developed a game for PC.
I had a
And
Baldur's
now,
Gate game
yeah,
on PS2, like
yeah,
a long. obviously like
This
a long
game has
time
been
ago.
in
It's very
development for
fun, but
Baldur's Gate 3 has been in development for so long. It's been in early access
hmm
for like 4 years. They've been constantly updating
hmm
it to like make it like a full release. And it
hmm
finally came out like a few weeks ago. And it's like obviously everyone loves it. It's like one of the most acclaimed games of the year, right up there with Tears of the Kingdom.
hmm
So yeah,
hmm
huge success for Larian Studio. Good on them. And now because it's so successful, they're being asked to port it to PS5 and Xbox Series X/S.
Ooh. hmm
And the point of the story is that they cannot port it to Xbox Series S because the hardware in the Series S is like not capable of handling the game in co-op mode. If you have two people playing the game on split screen, it's like too
Mm.
much stuff to render, and the game
Hmm.
breaks down basically. They're
Hmm.
gonna try to work around it somehow, maybe reduce the quality like a shit ton on co-op mode to make it work.
Mm.
But yeah, it's like it kind of calls into question like does Xbox's strategy of like having like the full console version that's like $500 and then like the shitty console version that's like $300, does that make sense? It's like the Series
Mm.
S is like significantly worse hardware than the Series X. It's like it cannot
Hmm.
run games nearly the same level of fidelity that the Series X can.
Hmm.
So I gotta wonder, is Microsoft's like strategy of having like a super affordable console, does that make sense for like games coming out today? Because so many games are being released with crazy high hardware requirements that are already struggling to run on like the best next gen hardware on like PS5
Yeah.
and Xbox Series X.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think they want to have it both ways, right? They want to have like high performance and like big name titles like Sony, but they also want to have like their like budget model like Nintendo that like is appealing for people who are like less don't want to invest that much money and like time
Yeah,
into it.
I mean the Series
But
S makes sense if you're only playing like multiplayer games that are like designed to be optimized, right? Like Call of Duty, sports
yeah,
games, stuff like that.
totally,
That's a really good
totally.
console for that.
Now
But
wait,
it's like,
we're talking about split screen, like two controllers in the same
yeah,
room style. Do
the
people
reason
still
split
even do
screens
that?
specifically is I know, right? Baldur's Gate 3 is so popular because it has stuff like this, right?
Well,
No other
also
game was
like
released with split screen today because it's like
the
obviously so demanding on the hardware to run multiple versions of the same game at the same time.
it must be different than because when I actually used to play co-op in Baldur's Gate 2, or maybe not. I feel like it was just Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, but I would play co-op with my dad, but it was like it wasn't split screen. We were just both on the same screen because it was like a top-down
I
type of
guess yeah, I
situation.
guess that's what I meant is like co-op. It's not literally split screen, but it's like if you want to like run multiple iterations, like rendering different areas, rendering different entities between two
Yeah,
different players that are seeing
can't
different
handle it.
things, and it's like obviously way more demanding on the hardware.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the problem with Xbox's strategy is that obviously having the Series S itself isn't a bad thing. The problem is that Microsoft has stipulated that any studio that wants to port a game onto their hardware or develop a game for their hardware
hmm
cannot develop it only for Xbox Series X. It has to be on both
Ooh,
platforms. You
yeah,
cannot
that's a
publish a game
problem.
on Xbox if you cannot publish it on Series S.
Yeah, I mean that just holds back Series X. So I mean that's
Yeah,
like what's good about how there's like PS4 and PS5 now is that like there are a few things that are like PS5 only, but most things are still both. Like I know you're very much like your whole shtick is you want to start seeing more things that are exclusively for PS5, which now that I own one, I
not
understand
necessarily
because there's
exclusive.
like
I'm fine with games being on all platforms. Just I want
yeah,
games to be next gen. Like I feel like this generation,
yeah,
I think
right,
developers are still stuck in the mindset that people do not own like next gen consoles, which made sense like 2 years ago when
mm-hmm,
nobody had a PS5 because they were so hard to
mm-hmm,
get. But now everyone's buying them, so it's like why are developers still not making games for PS5 hardware? Because it's like
yeah.
games are just like less innovative overall because of that. Like Armored
Well,
Core
so the
6 is perfectly
idea,
fine. Like that was
yeah,
me being overzealous. The game is
right,
beautiful and it runs really well. It's just like
mm-hmm.
you got to wonder like could they do more with the game if it was only on next gen and not on last gen?
Well, I mean, what I wonder about is like so if you have Xbox Series X, which is supposed to be like the analog to the PS5 in terms of generations, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah.
Timeline wise. Then you have the
Well,
Series
technically
S,
Series S is
which is
also.
but Series S
I
is
mean, it's
more
not
like
like
well, so Series S is supposed to be like maybe PS 4.5 or something, maybe we could say.
kind of. I mean,
So
it's
like
like it is next
it
gen.
just
It
seems
still has like an
unreasonable.
SSD. It
Yeah.
has newer graphics
Uh-huh.
technology. It's got a better infrastructure. Basically, it is just like
And
less of it
yet,
overall. It's like it's like less hardware that is
right.
next gen. There's no last gen hardware in it. It's just less of the next gen stuff that Xbox Series X has. So it's got
Hmm.
the same graphics card model. It's just like less clock speed, I guess. Basically,
Sure. But so, and
it
yet
also
at
has
the
like less
same
storage space,
time,
for example.
like Sony, there are consistently games being put out that run fine on PS5 and 4, but Xbox is making games that like can't even run on like the slightly less good version of that same generation, which seems like crazy to me. It just seems like
Yeah, I
it means
mean,
they like must have compromised hardware too much in the S. I guess that's like what my takeaway from
it's
that
going
would
to be
be.
interesting to see because I think a lot of games are also going to struggle to come out on PS5. Like Final Fantasy 16, for example, is like it's only on PS5 and it's
Mm-hmm.
still struggling to run on that hardware. It's like upscaled like crazy from like
Oh wow.
720p
Okay.
to run at HD resolution, and it's like the
Wow.
frame rate mode barely runs at 45 FPS in some areas.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
like even the best next gen hardware is already struggling with like some of the games that are coming out. So I think we're definitely going to see like a mid
Mm-hmm.
generation improvement with like the pro versions. Obviously, that's usually what happens. But
Mm.
yeah, it just kind of sucks
Mm-hmm.
to see that these consoles have already been kind of like dead in the water in terms of hardware because they're way behind what
Yeah.
developers are doing in PC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I
Anyway,
appreciated
it's
that the
just
budget
interesting to see
version of the
how Microsoft's
PS5
handling the
was.
whole Series S thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what is their response? Like, are they just telling people who want to get Baldur's Gate like tough luck, or?
Oh, Larian is still developing the game for Xbox. They're just the point is that their development on the Xbox version of the game is way slowed down compared to the PS5 version. The PS5 port's coming out
Mm.
pretty
Mm.
soon, and this
Mm-hmm.
Xbox version is slated for like next year. So
Mm.
like they really have to put work in to optimize this game for both models of the same hardware.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I kind of had a bit about Game Pass here, but honestly, I think we've kind of covered so much of this whole Xbox thing. We should probably just move on anyway.
Sure. All right.
All right, so we're back, and we were going to talk more about hardware. We've been talking about Xbox today and kind of like the software side of things, just like game development. But I want to talk more about like the hardware news that's been happening. So yeah, this is all going to
Yes,
be
this is sort
completely
of the
foreign stuff
segment
for Caleb,
for.
but I'm going to try to.
Yes.
This is like the 1% of our audience that cares about this shit, but it is important. I think PC gamers care about this stuff, so I want to talk about it a little bit. Not like super in
Listen up,
depth, but yeah, it
nerds.
is somewhat important.
This part's for you guys.
All right. So yeah, basically, um, let's start with a bit of like a preface here. So AMD and Nvidia, two graphics card giants, they're pretty much monopolized the industry. Um, so they're always in competition, like releasing like new generations of graphics cards in the same way that console companies do. So there's like graphics card generations that Nvidia and AMD both release at similar times to try to like
Mm.
compete with the industry and target different segments of that industry. So you have like high end graphics cards and then like mid tier and then low end with all different price points. And usually the high end stuff is like in the $800 range. Mid tier is like 500, 400, and then low end is like 200, $150.
Wow.
And
Just for graphics cards.
recently that those numbers have been completely thrown out of whack. Nvidia released their
Mm.
newest high end graphics card was like 1,500 US dollars, which is that's just the graphics card. That's how much my PC costs.
What the heck?
And
Like,
then
does that?
like
Can you just put that in any PC, or do you need like special other hardware to like even use that?
oh no, it's like it's they're all consumer graphics cards. They all run on the same connector on your motherboard.
I see.
The
I see. I see.
4090, which is the newest high end graphics card, is
Mm-hmm.
like ridiculously huge in terms of like its sheer
Mm-hmm.
volume. It's
Hmm.
like twice as wide as like your normal graphics card. So there are some cases it won't fit in, but yeah, and you also need like a bracket to like support it on the end so it doesn't like peel off the motherboard because of gravity.
Incredible.
That's like one aspect of it. For the most part, they're all consumer graphics cards. They're all designed to run
Mm.
on consumer PCs. Anyone that has
Mm.
a modern PCIe motherboard will be able to use them. But yeah,
Hmm.
that was like earlier this year, the newest generation, which is the RTX and NVIDIA 40 series, and then the
Mm.
AMD 7000 series of graphics cards. Those are the new ones that are being released right now. So yeah, earlier this year we had Nvidia launching their 40 series high-end cards. It always starts like bottom. It starts from top to bottom. They release the high-end cards first, and then throughout the rest of the year, they start to release their mid-tier and low-end cards. So Nvidia
I
released
see.
the 4090, the 4080, and the 4080 Ti. The Ti is like there's this whole thing where it's like not 4070 Ti. Sorry, not 4080 Ti. That one's not out yet. But yeah, there was this whole shenanigan where Nvidia had like two versions of the 4080, one with like slightly shittier specs, and they tried to charge like a similar amount of money for it, like $100 less. And it was such a ripoff, and there was so much backlash over this fucking shenanigans when they tried to release two versions of the same graphics card name, where one was like way shittier, it was not accurately priced. It was so bad that Nvidia had to rename it the shittier one and call it something else.
Whoa.
Anyway,
Whoa.
all this to say that like Nvidia's been like they've been kind of ahead of the curve recently, releasing these new graphics cards. So they released, I want to say six different graphics card tiers, from like the 4090, which is like $1,500, down to like the 4060, which I think is going for 300, 250, I think, something like that. And then AMD, around the same time as the 4090 was announced, they announced the 7900 XTX and the 7900 XT, which they also received a lot of backlash for. They did the same thing as Nvidia, where they had two cards with the same name, but they had slightly different specs. And the pricing was also not accurately reflected in the shittier card. The shittier card was also stupidly overpriced. It was costing like $900 for a card that should have been like $700. So that was obviously a huge shit fest for AMD as well. The 7900 XTX was actually a pretty decent card though, because it was $1,000, but it met the performance rate of the 4080, which was like $1,200. So they did a pretty good job with that one. And then they also had the 7600, which was like $250, which is also kind of overpriced, but it was fine. Designed to target the 4060, compete with that. So, and then after AMD announced those cards, Nvidia just kept releasing new cards in the 40 series, and AMD just did nothing. For the past like 8 months, they've been radio silent on new graphics cards. They released the high end and the low end, and there was nothing in the mid range, which is where most gamers are. Most gamers care about the mid range. And then so all that happened, Nvidia kind of just tore up the market with their shitty monopolistic pricing practices and proprietary software practices, where they only released their new AI software on the newest graphics cards. We'll get into that in a second, but yeah. And then, so with the news today that I want to get into is that...
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you go first.
Go ahead. No. Go
okay,
ahead.
So yeah. Basically, the news this week is that AMD has now announced the 7800 and the 7700 XT, which are their new mid-range graphics cards. And the 7800 is $500, which is actually a really, really good price, because the 6800 XT, which is the card I have, launched as an MSRP of $650. So this is one of the first graphics cards in the current gen lineup that is actually lower priced than its previous gen version, which I think is great. Because I think mid-range graphics cards is probably the area that most PC gamers care about. Most PC gamers want to get like really good performance that's like 120 FPS on games. That's like not like $1,000+, which is what the high end is now targeting.
Yeah.
So having these mid-range graphics cards from AMD is amazing. So 7800 XT, my take is that it's really good. I think this card is super duper competitive with the last generation of mid-range graphics cards while being a cheaper price, which is amazing. But then you have the 7700 XT, which is like it's $50 cheaper than 7800 XT, but it's like really worse specs. So it's kind of weird because AMD keeps doing this thing where they have like a good graphics card and then the shittier graphics card that's like slightly cheaper. And I think their goal is to like upsell people, because they look at the 7700 XT and it's like, oh, this is really bad. This price to performance ratio is terrible. I'll buy the 7800 XT for $50 more.
Right.
So yeah, they keep upselling.
Like,
they keep doing this thing where they keep upselling people. And it was the same thing with the 7900 series. So they've done this 2 times now, where they've released 2 relatively similar graphics cards in terms of pricing, and then they just try to upsell you on the better one. I mean, I can't complain that much, because 7800 XT is a really good graphics card from what I've seen. But yeah, it's just it's why are they doing this thing where they're upselling people? It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it makes sense from a business standpoint, but it just hurts their brand in the long term.
Yeah, it sounds like incredibly frustrating. I mean, how often as a PC builder gamer do you realistically need to update your graphics cards so that you're not like just left in the dust when new games come out?
I think most gamers are not actually updating nearly as much as the industry would like them to. Because
Of
like
course.
Steam has like this thing called a Steam hardware survey, which is basically like
Mm-hmm.
an opt-in thing where Steam checks your hardware and then publishes it in like statistics. And most
Uh-huh.
gamers are still using graphics cards from like 2 generations ago, not even last
Mm.
generation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like obviously Nvidia controls 2/3 to 3/4 of the market share.
Yeah.
AMD is catching up now because they're being more competitive. They're targeting Nvidia's like the main areas where Nvidia is failing to be competitive in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's good to see AMD is being good at targeting that monopolization, but also AMD is also just not really competing in the areas that I think Nvidia is in terms of ray tracing and AI, which we'll talk about in a
Mm.
second.
Mm.
But yeah, it's I don't think most gamers are not updating the graphics card more than once every 5 years. More so
Mm.
like once every 7 years. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
7 years is probably the upper limit of how long you'd want to wait in terms of playing new
Mm.
games. But I think most gamers are
Mm-hmm.
not playing new games. Most gamers are playing CS:GO or Rocket League or Valorant or whatever,
Yeah.
which is like those are the most games that have the longest term in terms of longest value in terms of replayability and just
Mm-hmm.
playing with friends for hundreds or thousands of hours.
Overwatch.
Yeah, exactly. Overwatch is also
Yeah.
pretty optimized, so that one's going to last for a while. Well,
Mm.
Overwatch 2, whatever. That's a whole other
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's not really news anymore. I could rant about that Overwatch 2 for an hour, but yeah, we don't. It's already been covered to death by everyone else, so let's not talk about
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, just
So
bring
basically,
your
it's
point
like
back. You go first.
the same number of years between if you were a console player, like between the
Yeah,
times when new consoles get released is when you would
there are
like to
some
get a new
gamers that are
graphics
like
card.
buying a new graphics card every generation for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason, which I think is stupid. But if you want to spend the money on it, why not, right?
More power to you, yeah.
Yeah. I don't. There's no applicable use for stuff like the 4090. Anything that costs more than $1,000 is already like outlandishly expensive for a graphics card.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think before the 7800 XT was announced, I would say that the current gen is kind of pointless. I'd say just buy a last gen card. But now I'm more inclined to
Mm.
say that if you're going to buy a new graphics card this year, I think the 7800 XT is a really good buy
Mm.
because it's way cheaper than anything Nvidia is offering in the mid range, and it's as competitive in terms of performance.
Mm. Well, you heard it here, folks. Game
I'm an
show,
AMD shell.
game
We're
shows
sponsored by AMD.
endorsement. We endorse the AMD, whichever one you just said.
Yeah,
It's the good one.
that's what it's called. Whatever one you just said.
Let's go get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the 6800 XT, which is like the last gen version of the card that was just announced.
I'll be buying one and putting it into my MacBook. I'm sure that it's.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
it could
Apple's
fit
very
in there.
compatible with that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Apple famously really likes it if you switch out the graphics card for something that's not an Nvidia. It works really well.
Does your MacBook even have a graphics card?
Yeah, it has an Nvidia.
Oh, cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
you have OBS encoding. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
Awesome.
I had to
Okay.
check this when I was preparing to record today, so
Nice.
I learned what
Okay.
kind
So
of
yeah.
graphics card is in my laptop.
So yeah. I mean, AMD's made some good moves, minus the
Mm.
whole $50 discount upselling shenanigans with the
Yeah, right.
7700 XT.
But that's
And I
industry
guess
practice also, because that's like Nvidia does the same thing.
kind of. I mean, Nvidia less so. I think they
Oh
did
yeah?
this. They
Okay.
tried to do the same thing this generation, and then it backfired horribly. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
AMD's received the same backlash because
Weird.
it's named appropriately, but it's not priced appropriately. Whereas with
I
Nvidia,
see.
it was just not named or priced appropriately. It was just like
Oh,
a
so that
total
one was
scam,
just straight up a scam, whereas this one's more just
basically.
like kind of sleazy or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think gamers are still going to fall victim to it because most people don't understand compute units or video memory and how they affect performance. I don't
Mm-hmm.
really understand it fully to be either, but I'm getting there. I'm getting an idea of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
You
not a
asked you asked me
scientist.
before to
I'm
explain
not
what
an
a graphics
engineer.
card is to you. Do you want me
Oh
to give
yeah,
you the basic breakdown? Okay, so
let's go.
basically,
Yeah.
so a CPU has like a CPU and GPU are both fundamentally the same type of hardware. They have processor threads slash cores that are
Okay.
designed to handle
Armored core.
calculations. So
Okay.
just think of like a computing task as like a bunch of burgers stacked together on a big plate, and each core in a CPU or a GPU is its own mouth. How
Mm-hmm.
many mouths it can chew?
Mm.
So on a CPU, you usually have like 8 to 16 to 24 cores, or mouths in
Mm-hmm.
this case, that can all
Mm-hmm.
chew burgers, and they all have their own clock speed, which is basically how fast the mouths can chew. So
Mm.
the more mouths you have, the more tasks you can handle.
Mm-hmm.
Some tasks or plates of burgers in this case are only going to have like six burgers, for example. So not every mouth is
Mm.
going to be applicable in that case. So you don't
Uh.
necessarily need all the cores, but
Okay.
you do need them to chew fast so that you can handle eating the burgers
Right.
fast.
But graphics are
So
like a really big burger, right?
so a graphic is like
Hence
a
why they
thousand
have their own
burgers.
card. Okay, I
And
gotcha.
so a graphics card has so a graphics processing is basically like 1,000 burgers that are all smaller. They're like mini burgers.
Mm.
They're like slider burgers.
Sliders.
They're
Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
small
Okay.
burgers.
Uh-huh.
And so you have like 60 to 80
Mm-hmm.
mouths in that case. You have a lot more cores that are chewing
Mm.
slower because you don't need to chew that
Mm.
fast to eat a slider burger. You
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of mouths to eat all the thousands of burgers at at slower speeds. You don't need to chew that fast. You just need to have a lot of different mouths chewing.
Well, right, because presumably, like, you aren't getting like 100% new graphics on the screen every second. You know what I mean? A
Yeah,
lot of the graphics are like
rendering
staying the same.
stuff. So basically, a
Yeah.
graphics card. The reason graphics cards exist is because graphics processing is requires parallel processing, which is different from what CPUs do, which is like unified processing. CPUs are designed to handle big loads very fast, whereas graphics cards
Mm-hmm.
handle smaller loads or they handle no sorry I said that wrong. CPUs handle small loads very fast, whereas graphics cards handle big loads slower.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
they
that
have
makes
more.
sense.
So graphics cards have more cores, but they just the cores operate at slower clock speeds, basically.
So a graphics card is
Whereas with
essentially
CPUs,
like
they operate very fast. They're very fast cores, but there's less of them.
it's like a supplementary second, like specialized CPU that only processes graphics, because like
Yeah,
that
it only
needs
handles
so
graphics,
much
but
more
just
support.
the reason that you need this is because CPU there's not enough cores in the CPU to handle the load of processing all those graphics.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It can't handle those big tasks in parallel. It can only
Mm-hmm.
handle smaller tasks like calculations required to run the OS and programs and such,
Mm.
but at faster speeds, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. Anyway, graphics cards also have like their own video memory, which is like a special type of like
Oh.
memory that computers have. That's only
So
for
there's
handling like
built-in.
rendering loads. That like remember it like
Okay.
buffers the frames is what it's called. It's like frame buffering is
Okay.
like keeping the frames stored ahead of time so you can just display them sooner. So video memory is also very important because games require frame buffers to have the frames ready to display, and a lot of games will not run if you don't have enough video memory to buffer those frames out properly.
Hmm.
So compute units, video memory, or compute units is like the AMD version. It's like called CUDA cores on NVIDIA, whatever. They're both the same thing. They're all cores that handle loads of graphics processing, and you
Hmm.
need to have memory. Yeah, you need to have a sufficient amount of memory in your graphics card that can buffer the frames out to run the game.
Hmm.
So a lot of the problem with NVIDIA cards is that a lot of them do not have enough video memory. They
Mm-hmm.
run faster than the AMD cards for certain tasks, but they oftentimes lack the memory to play certain games. Like a lot of NVIDIA cards only have 8 gigabytes of video memory, which is not enough for
Hmm.
some games coming out today. And then
Yeah.
AMD has a lot of video memory. They offer like super overkill amounts of video memory on all their cards, but not
Hmm.
necessarily as fast processing.
Oh.
So yeah, so the
I see. So
reason
they
people
each
like
have like
NVIDIA
different
is that they
specializations.
have. You go first and hear you. Say it again.
No, I was just saying. So these two different like main brands that make these, they also have like their own sort of specializations in terms of like what they're each good at.
Yeah, AMD is kind of competitive because the software they develop. I mean, I'd say the main competition right now is in software actually, because
Mm.
I think technology has kind of figured out how graphics processing works. There's no debate over how to
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all
I
fundamentally the
see.
same technology.
Mm.
I think software, AI, those are the areas where the companies are competing now, and I think NVIDIA is better at developing like super high tech, super efficient, super optimized, high performance software, upscaling AI stuff. it's proprietary though. It's optimized for their graphics cards, and then AMD develops like slightly worse, slightly slower software AI stuff that's usable in any graphics card. So AMD is better being open source, which is a huge boon for them reputation wise. It's kind of debatable how it affects their bottom line. And Nvidia just like, yeah, just fucking make the best software possible, but only for like the newest graphics cards that we own. So yeah, that segues us very nicely into our next topic, which is the new upscaling announcements, or not upscaling, really, frame generation announcements. So we talked before about upscaling, how you have you have an image being rendered at a lower resolution that's upscaled to a display resolution that you want to have, right? Upscaling DLSS FSR.
Yes.
And so that's actually not the full picture. So what's happened with this current generation is that NVIDIA's introduced this thing called frame generation, which is basically like something where the graphics card API looks at the game's engine to figure out what's going to happen next, like where the motion is happening, where the character is moving, how the screen is going to change in the next frame, and it uses that data to interpolate a completely new frame. It's called frame generation. So it's generating new frames for your game using AI, looking at the game's engine and motion to figure out what it can display in the next frame before the actual rendered frame shows next. So this basically lets you double your frame rate, right? You're getting twice as many frames. You're getting a new frame in between each frame. So it's getting twice as many frames per second with like these AI generated frames. And obviously
on,
the technology is
algorithmic prediction. Okay.
But yeah, algorithm. It only works like by using the game engine, because like how TVs have like motion smoothing where it's like using like Faco frames to make the movie display at 60 FPS and look like shit, right?
Yes.
So basically, the difference here is it's not just doing it based on like what the screen is showing. It's specifically designed to look at the game's engine and the physics and the motion to figure out how to display a new frame that's like way more accurate and actually looks good.
Wow, that's so crazy. So that's not done.
The technology
like, by
isn't
hand
flawless.
By a programmer, like okay.
Well, I mean, it has to be implemented by hand because it's the same thing with upscaling, where it's only going to work if the developer puts it into their game. It can't just be like applied to any game like a third-party setting. It has to be implemented into the game's settings. So it only works if a developer adds it, which requires the developer to program the interface, so the AI to work with the game.
Got it. So this is one of those things that's proprietary software.
This is one of the things that NVIDIA is doing to promote their new graphics cards. Because it's DLSS. Okay. So DLSS 2 is the upscaling one, and now DLSS 3 is the frame generation one. So they've done upscaling. Upscaling works pretty well. It's a pretty essential feature for most games because every console game uses upscaling to run. And I think most PC gamers are using upscaling when it's available because it just boosts performance a lot by decreasing the render resolution. Now, frame generation is the new thing NVIDIA is doing, and it's only on their 40 series graphics cards. It's not even on all NVIDIA cards, not let alone AMD cards. That's a whole other bag of worms. But this frame generation thing in DLSS 3 is only on the brand new 40 series cards. So if you can't use this on last generation NVIDIA cards, only on the brand new card. So that's where a lot of the controversy is coming from with this new AI software. It obviously looks amazing. Like having frame generation is so useful for so many different game applications because you can just run games twice as fast in theory. Obviously, how it looks in game is a whole other story because AI is never going to be perfect. The graphics can look kind of weird and blocky and jittery. Like you can look at comparisons online. You'll see like they have like Spider-Man Remastered running on DLSS 3, and it's like Spider-Man's arms are kind of like phasing in and out of reality, like on the shoulders because like the arms.
I was gonna say
are
like
not rendering properly.
When you explained that, I just imagine it going like completely haywire and like you getting like certain
it is pretty
frames
smooth.
where
like
just
it's hard to notice the
wrong,
problems when it's like running at 60 FPS. Yeah, obviously, if you like pause it, you will definitely notice the issues. But it's like, yeah, it does run pretty smooth when the game's running at full speed. And obviously, having the extra frames is going to be a huge deal. The problem is like you don't really need if your game's already running at like 60 FPS. What's the point of adding frame generation? Like you don't need your game to run higher than that, right? So I think the problem is that
what's like
if you can only use it on the newest cards, what's the point of having it? Because all the newest cards are running games super smooth, right? The experience is already good for the most part. You have the 4060 and the 4060 Ti, which are like the low end cards, which suck complete dick. Some of them are actually worse than their last generation versions. So yeah, there is that problem. That's like probably the one application I'd say where frame generation matters is for the 60 series on the newest graphics cards.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I don't see why this new software is proprietary to the current generation. It makes way more sense for old gen cards, which are not going to be running games as smooth because they're not keeping up with the new game hardware, the new game software.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But for new gen cards, it makes no sense. So it baffles me why Nvidia would decide to make this new frame generation feature exclusive to their newest cards only. Because there's very little application for it.
Yeah, just get people to. Well, right. It's like, yeah, it's a good point. It's like
Obviously,
it's
it's
more
more
needed on
appealing-
lower end cards.
Yeah, it's more needed,
Yeah.
but it's not available there. So it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, it's like a nice feature to upsell people on because there's there's very little reason to buy a 40 series card right now. If you already have a good 30 series card, you're perfectly covered for this generation of games. But yeah, I guess Nvidia wants to sell more cards, so they're going to try to incentivize people to switch over to a new one.
Yeah, it is
That's
funny
pretty
to
much the
like
reason.
have a very legitimately like cool and real feature, but have it implemented where it's just overkill, and it's just only
Yeah, it's
for
complete
upselling.
overkill for the current gen, basically.
Yeah, it's strange.
So yeah, all this to say, AMD has also announced a similar frame generation software. Uses different AI techniques, I guess. But yeah, they announced FSR3, which is the competitor to DLSS 3, which also uses frame generation. Back when they announced the 7900 XT, like late 2022, they announced FSR3 frame generation. Everyone was super excited because AMD is famous for porting all of their software to make it open source, to put the extra work in to make sure that anyone can use it. And then radio silence for the past 8 months. They have said nothing about this. They announced it and it's been completely under wraps. Whereas DLSS 3 has been out for like the past 8 months. It's been usable on all the new graphics cards. AMD's just been sitting in the shadows, fucking biding their time, I guess. But yeah, along with the 7800 and 7700 XT, they announced FSR 3. They announced it again. They already announced it before. They announced it'll be coming out. Not even out yet. It's coming out in the fall this year. So I'm also baffled why they would announce it twice and not just release it. Just wait until it's ready to announce it again, but whatever. Yeah. So my theory was that they were going to have FSR 3 frame generation be available alongside the release of Starfield. That was going to be like the first game it was going to be available on. But yeah, we haven't heard anything about that, which tells me that they're not going to be releasing it for Starfield. So it'll probably be later in the fall, like maybe October or something like that, or November even.
When does Starfield come out? This month?
Just comes
Next
out
month?
in like
September?
a week. September 6th, so like less than a week now.
Ooh, I see. Or maybe it'll be like backwards integrated for it or something.
It'll
like
be
that.
integrated. It'll absolutely be integrated later on. But I'm just like, why not release it during the biggest partnership you've ever had?
Totally. Yeah. Why not have like a 100% tie-in?
Anyway, they ran out of time. They couldn't finish all the performance optimizations in time. So yeah, it is great to see because FSR 3 is going to be compatible with any graphics card, which is amazing because it actually has it has a lot more applications for old gen graphics cards than it does new gen ones.
Yeah,
and
sure.
gamers are rejoicing because NVIDIA gamers, AMD gamers, and pretty much everyone uses old gen cards. So having this feature available for old gen cards is going to be a game changer. Frame generation just doubles your frame rate, which is a huge deal for a lot of gamers.
Gamers everywhere are honestly going crazy over this one.
Gamers are going nuts.
I'm seeing it everywhere.
Gamers in the streets. They're rioting over this.
They are.
Gamers
the
rise
flipping
up.
cars. Yeah, gamers are their gamers are finally rising up.
Yep. Anyway, it's exciting to see. I mean, I'm not sure how many games I'm going to be able to use it for personally. I think my 6800 XT can pretty much handle anything I throw at it at 60 FPS, but having the option available is always nice, and I'm excited to see more improvements over time on the NVIDIA and AMD sides to make this feature more stable and make it a more mainstream option for gamers. On the other hand, I'm also concerned because upscaling has kind of notoriously become like the crutch for optimization for PC developers, where they're not willing to actually optimize games for like native render resolutions. They just have they just expect gamers to use upscaling to like make their games playable.
Yeah.
Because many games do not run at like a native 1440p or 4K at like a playable frame rate. You have to like upscale from 1080p to make them playable. Anyway, I'm kind of worried that the same thing's gonna happen with like frame generation, where it's like, oh yeah, the game runs at 15 FPS, but if you use AI frame generation, you can get 30 FPS. Whoa, it's playable now.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's like sort of has portends darkly for like the future of how they're gonna be designing games.
Yeah,
Or like just like having things be like significantly lower quality when they're initially released, and then relying on you to use AI to actually like make the game.
yeah.
It's like sort of highly problematic in some ways.
And it also sucks more for the fact that NVIDIA's partnerships are going to be only for not only NVIDIA cards, but only new NVIDIA cards are going to be able to use this feature, which could really suck. I mean, I guess that's like kind of like the silver lining, is that I think developers are going to be smart enough to notice that putting AI upscaling as like a performance crunch is not a smart idea when like 90% of gamers are not going to be able to use it.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
that's probably going to stop them from relying on it too much compared to upscaling, which is available on every card. So yeah, we'll see. Anyway, that's all this news about PC gaming. You can turn your brain back on now. Last thing I want to talk about with hardware is the PlayStation Portal. This is the new.
What is this?
Exactly. This is the new handheld remote play companion that PlayStation 5 is releasing.
Oh, okay.
For
I have heard about
$200.
this actually.
Yes, this was
Okay.
shown at the Sony State of Play. I think it was back in June.
And so you need to have a PS5 for this to function, or
So this is not an independent handheld system. This is a remote play companion. So you have to have a
So
PS5.
I hate the remote play.
And then
shit.
you can,
It's so
if you're
stupid.
on the same Wi-Fi network as your PS5, you can play the game
Oh
on
my
your.
God.
You can
How
play the
is
game
that
on your
useful?
handhelds.
How is that
know.
useful? What did they
not.
think that a Wi-Fi network is?
It's even worse because you can like play. You can already do this on your phone.
Have they been like playing Death Stranding? They're like, oh, if you're on like the Wi-Fi network, it goes across the whole country.
Now you can walk around your house at the same time to get the full immersive experience while you're playing Death Stranding.
Yeah, you can stand like 1.5 rooms away, and then like, what the hell? That's so dumb. What is the point?
Anyway,
of that?
this was like pretty much every gamer on the internet had the exact same reaction you did to this. Rightfully so. This is like a very, very stupid announcement. I don't know what the application for this is for. Minus like, if you're like playing on your couch and like, I want to go play my bed instead. I'm going to take my PlayStation Portal with me and play my bed instead. That's pretty much the only application I can see. Other than like maybe I'm making a meal, I can like switch over to my PlayStation Portal while I'm waiting for my noodles to finish cooking.
Hold it with one hand while I'm frying my eggs or whatever. Yeah. I guess it means
Whoops,
you can,
I dropped
like,
it. That'll be $200.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you can like play it in bed. You can like play it while you're on the toilet, I guess. Like
Yeah,
maybe
that's
you could
pretty
do,
much
I mean,
it.
sometimes when I take a bath, I'll like wrap my phone in plastic wrap and then use headphones so I can like watch like K-pop content like while I'm in the bath, and then if I get my phone wet, it's fine because there's saran wrap on it. So maybe they're imagining people are gonna like
Beautiful.
saran wrap it so they can take it in the shower.
Well, it's gonna be hard to do that because it's like basically like they took like a DualSense controller and like split it in half and put that on the either side of the little handheld screen.
Sick. Okay.
So being able to use that controller while it's covered in saran wrap is gonna be pretty tough, but maybe you can pull it off.
Yeah. Oh,
Anyway,
sounds like
I
a
don't
skill
think
issue if you
anyone
can't
who
play.
has a brain is gonna be buying this product, but I mean they're releasing it. It's definitely out there. And yeah, it's like why would you ever spend $200 on like a device that can only be used in the same building as your PlayStation 5 when you can buy like a Nintendo Switch Lite for the same price and it can be used anywhere?
And you could play just different games. Why?
Or just like a
don't-
Steam Deck, which is like the 256
yeah.
gigabyte model, 128
Totally.
gigabyte model for the same price.
When are they going to? They're not going to do this, but I'm just still mad that they changed the DualSense controller for PS5. Like it's, why did they have to do?
You don't
that?
like the DualSense 5?
Well, like, I mean, it's fine, but like, it's definitely bigger, so it's like, it definitely cramps my hands more to hold. But like, you literally you got a 100% score when the first time that you made it, and then you didn't change it at all for 4 generations, like 4.5 generations of PlayStations, and then all of a sudden you're like, what if we like made it more like an Xbox controller? Like, what if we took the controller
I have
that's
to
just
take the
the platonic ideal of video game controllers, and you were just like, what if we
remove
made
your
it
identity.
weird and different size instead? Like, yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why'd
I'm
they
gonna
have to do
take. I'm
that?
gonna actually take the opposing view on this. That when I switched over from Xbox to PS5, I really really like the PS5 controller. I mean,
Mm,
I tried
sure.
my friend had a PS4 when I was in high school. And I tried his
Mm-hmm.
controller. I was not a fan of it at all. I did not like
Hmm.
holding it. It felt too small in my hands.
Mm.
I felt like I
Yeah.
had to like really wrestle with it to get my thumbs in the right place. Whereas with the
Mm-hmm.
Xbox controller, it was always ergonomic and always felt good to hold. And I think I felt the same
Yeah.
way with the PS5 controller. I was like, wow, this is way better than the PS4 controller. I like this a lot
Hmm.
more.
It's probably just that I'm used to it. I mean, I literally like grew up
Yeah.
playing a PlayStation 2, and then when
And
I
now when I
got
try to
a
switch back
PlayStation
to
4,
like the
it's the
Xbox
same
One
size
controller, it just feels alien to hold compared to the PS5 controller.
for sure. I mean,
Anyway, I really
Xbox
like
is
the
just
PS5
hilarious
controller.
because, yeah, I mean, other than just the fact that I just think it's weird that they like changed the formula after it seemed like pretty established that it was like perfect as is.
I mean, I guess it was
Uh,
kind of like a design renovation for them because they also changed the look of the console dramatically, right? So I guess
yeah,
the
it's
goal was kind
white.
of try to make
It's
something
white.
diverse
Yeah, they
and
wanted to
unique.
like go out on a limb kind of. So I mean, yeah. Other than that, I don't think it's bad or anything like that. Part of it is just that when I first got it, I was playing Death Stranding, which involved like holding down a couple of buttons for like an hour at a time. So I think I'm certainly not having the same kind of issues with Armored Core, where it's like instead of just pressing
And Death
every single button.
Stranding Director's Cut has the haptic feedback, which actively punishes you for playing the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's like carpal tunnel syndrome accelerator.
Hey, it's realistic. You got to struggle to win. That's what Kojima wants you to do.
Yeah,
If
precisely.
you're not feeling pain playing his games, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Anyway, yeah, I guess my only complaint with the DualSense and every other modern controller, minus the Xbox Elite controller, is that
hmm,
they all use like analog inputs,
hmm,
which is just shit ton 3000 because they're all designed to wear down over time and get damaged by
hmm,
repeated use.
hmm,
It baffles me even more so that the $200 DualSense Edge controller, which is like their pro model they released recently, does not
hmm,
have magnetic inputs, while the Xbox Elite controller does.
hmm.
It's like I can understand why they're doing it because it means more stick drift, more controller replacements being purchased,
Yeah.
and the warranty on those controllers is strategically designed so it wears off the second the stick drift starts to kick in.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just like that's something I hate about all modern controllers is that they all have equal. They've all designed this monopolistic bullshit where they all use shitty analog inputs to wear down over time and make you buy new ones.
Hmm.
But hey,
Awesome.
on the DualSense Edge, you can they have replaceable stick modules. You can pay Sony $20 to replace them after they inevitably wear down. Wow, thank you, Sony.
That's something.
It's better than buying a whole new controller, but I just wish they
I
used magnetic
mean,
inputs so it wouldn't be a problem in the first place. If I'm paying $200 for a controller, I shouldn't have to replace the sticks on it. Come on.
I agree with you absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, it's obviously it's just a shitty thing, but there's nothing you can do about it because it's monopolistic.
mm-hmm. Yeah, planned obsolescence.
Yeah, I had a bit here about my new workstation in my motel background. I know it looks really boring behind me, but my new desk is actually beautiful. I don't really have a
Mm-hmm.
good segue for it, so maybe we can just skip over it. But yeah, I guess I'll just briefly summarize that. Like, got this desk here.
Mm-hmm.
I've ordered a monitor arm, which is basically like clamps to the desk. It's freestanding,
Mm.
supports my monitors as opposed to the monitors having stand on my desk.
Mm-hmm.
I've got these cable management boxes that I've like screwed into the bottom of my desk. Keep all the
Very
cables
nice.
off the ground. Looks beautiful. And yeah, so I've spent all this money on my desk setup and then like nothing behind me, so it just looks super boring. Like I have spent no money on this
Yeah.
room.
Well, we have the opposite style of setup, right? It's like my in front of me is just like my out of the box laptop, but your in front of you setup is like entirely,
The
it's
gamer zone.
functional for you to look at. For me, it's all just like I'm just peacocking, I'm just showing off. You know what I mean? I have like my
Yeah, I
Renaissance
mean I want to
Society
get
tote
some
bag,
fancy
my
plants too.
cool my cool Muji clock. Yeah, you get some plants. I'll give you some plants. I mean, my front of desk is definitely like cool. I like kind of moved some stuff around to like make it work for today, but I got my aloe plant. I got
There
like
you go.
some cactus
You got a way more
cuttings.
interesting setup than I do.
Yeah, you can even see my PlayStation 4 controller just sitting on a book over there. I got some candles.
Incredible.
Yeah, got to have candles.
I can only do a rotating webcam because the webcam is very finicky about how it gets screwed in, so I don't want to mess with it.
Mm. Yeah, I should probably buy a webcam.
I think your camera quality looks fine from the recording.
Yeah, I'd rather be able.
Anyway.
I would love to be able to control the angle more and like where it
Yeah,
is.
that's true.
But I also
Anyway,
like I yeah.
finally get to talk about games. And the first thing I want to talk about in this game discussion segment is the movie Dune 2. The reason I want to talk about that is, well, first of all, you may have heard that the Dune 2 movie was delayed. I'm pretty sure everyone's heard about this international news.
I have
Because
not.
Warner Brothers sucks, and you haven't heard that Dune 2 was delayed. Okay, well, you
I
live
didn't
under
even
a
know they were
rock,
making
so
a Dune 2.
incredible. Anyway, the
second
Dune
Dune?
movie, Denis Villeneuve, I think that's how you pronounce it, made the Dune adaptation of the book back in
With Timothée
2021.
Chalamet.
Yeah, it was super acclaimed. I loved it. It was an amazing movie. Only covered like the first half of the first book. So they're making the sequel to that movie that covers the second half. It was slated to be released this fall, I think in November. And now they have to delay it because of the strikes. Warner Brothers is basically saying we don't want to pay our employees to promote this movie or market it, so we're basically just going to delay it until they're done striking. And I'm honestly starting to think it might get delayed a second time. It's been delayed till March now.
Yeah.
And looking at the strikes now, and there's no resolution in view. The companies are just refusing to pay their employees anything or resolve any sort of substantial complaints. So it just seems like this is going to go on forever because, I mean, the Hollywood is pretty resilient, I think, on this topic. They're not going to back down on these strikes. So yeah, we might just this movie might just get delayed indefinitely. Hollywood's kind of in a stalled period after Barbenheimer. Barbenheimer was the last hurrah of Hollywood and before the whole world collapsed because now there's no room for film or television to release anything because there's no one to work on these projects.
It's so cool that just the last two big budget movies that we'll ever get in history or in the United States are Barbie and Oppenheimer. And now,
I mean, Oppenheimer was pretty amazing. That's a pretty good last hurrah in my opinion.
After that, everyone's my boss was telling me that he thought it had like really good pacing. He was saying like Christopher Nolan is good with pacing.
Yep.
I
have a lot to say about the Oppenheimer movie, but I don't want to turn this into a film discussion podcast.
Yeah,
we won't talk about too
basically
much,
I have basically no interest in seeing either of them really, but I would maybe go see them for fun. But
I think you really enjoy Oppenheimer, but that's just me. I mean, it depends.
Yeah, I mean, I recently watched like the third Nolan Batman, which was hilarious. And
my parents love that movie, and I honestly don't understand why. It's good, but it's not like incredible.
I mean,
it's probably one of Nolan's worst movies in my opinion.
It's definitely like the most absurd out of the Batman
It is so
ones.
weird how like they just like there's inexplicable plot events that just happen out of thin air. Batman's just explaining how they're going to do an all-out assault on Bane.
Yeah, and just thinking about like
it just baffles me.
Like how it came out and like in the context of it coming out is like all about like Occupy Wall Street is like
Occupy Wall Street is
bad.
About. Fascism is good.
it's so funny. But I don't know. I mean, where the movie like Inception, I actually think that movie does not have good pacing. And I thought like basically after the first like introductory sequence, it was incredibly boring. And
yeah, that's fair. Inception is like inherently weirdly paced because it's like several different interweaving or overlapping plot sequences happening on top of each other. So it's like it's pretty difficult to pace, I think, just in that context. But also just like filmmaking in general, that movie is not up to par. I think with some of Nolan's other projects. I love Interstellar. I mean, it's not like my favorite space movie ever because you have stuff like Solaris and 2001. But yeah, I think Oppenheimer is definitely his best work by far that I've seen because it's the movie is very well paced.
I have not heard any negative feedback from anyone about Oppenheimer. Well, actually,
the main drama is the main complaint or controversy, I guess, is basically that the movie kind of glosses over like Native American / Japanese oppression in the context of World War II and this Alamo Project. Which is, I think it's fair criticism because the movie does gloss over those things, so that's totally valid. But I think it also doesn't make sense because it's
from
like
a movie like this.
It's the movie is supposed to be like Oppenheimer's subjective experience in his life. That's what the movie's about. So covering the things that Oppenheimer does not think about doesn't really make sense.
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's one of. I mean, like what I heard it compared to was, what is it? Is it The Wind Rises? Is that the not like the other Miyazaki, the like Studio Ghibli movie about the guy who has to like design planes for the Japanese during World War II. And
I just searched up The Wind Rises, and the first of all was The Wind Rises controversy. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's that one. I mean, I remember seeing it when it came out, but there was like I did actually kind of feel this way when I saw it. I don't know if I'd feel this way now, but there was a sense of like that it's about the experience of this guy and how he feels kind of torn about how he has to like work for the fascist government, but there at the same time there isn't a sense of like there isn't as overwhelming a sense of like, oh, this is bad as like
Yeah,
one
I
might
would say
want
that
there
like
to be, but at the same time I also don't want to be a person who's saying like movies have to blatantly tell you what things are right and wrong like
yeah,
in them at all times,
yeah.
you know, and
A lot of the
establish
people I've talked about
context.
this movie have given the impression that they think the movie's bad because it's not covering historical events with full dignity in regard to
Right.
their
I
full
mean, it's
historical
not. It is
context.
like it's not a documentary. You know what I mean?
But I think as a film media guy, you will respect the fact that, creators have the right to pursue specific narratives and tell and share different themes. As long as they execute the themes they want to execute properly, I think that's probably sufficient, right?
No. I mean, I think it's like a case by case basis, and there's like more
Yeah.
that goes
I don't
into
want to
like
give any sweeping generalizations, but
yeah, for
that's
sure.
my take on Oppenheimer. Anyway, gaming. We're talking
Gaming,
about gaming on this show. Yeah. So
gaming.
the reason I brought up Dune 2 was that, I
Oppenheimer's
mean,
important because without winning World War II, we would not have World War
we would not
II
have
video
Japan
games.
making video games, and that would
We
suck.
also would not have Japan making video games that have to do with like the trauma of experiencing like a nuclear attack either. So
Yeah.
um, well, let's cut that. But anyway, okay. So Dune. So no Dune 2. No, I haven't even seen Dune 1. So is there going to be a game adaptation of Dune? Is that
There is
happening?
already a game. There's like an RTS game made out of it.
Dune
But the reason I
RTS.
wanted to
Huh?
talk about it is like these movies, or the book, the media in general around Dune is like so interesting from like a sci-fi melee combat synthesis of like, if you know about Dune at all, it's basically like this sci-fi world. It's like 10,000 like 20,000 years in the future, basically, where
Mm-hmm.
like personal like shield technology has gotten so advanced that projectile weapons are completely useless now. So everyone uses melee
Hmm.
weapons. It's like
Mm.
all the wars are fought hand to hand.
Hmm.
So it's like technology is so advanced that everyone's reverted back to like the Stone Age. That's like super interesting to me. And it's like
Yeah.
everyone's like super proficient hand to hand fighters.
Cool.
And in the movie, that's like a huge part of it. How like the action in the movies is like super, like grounded and down to earth and like very focused
Nice.
on
Cool.
combat.
So there's like fight choreography and stuff,
Yeah, there's
like
a lot of
hand-to-hand stuff.
choreography
That's
and
sick.
how the actors portray this futuristic world where everyone has to be super good at sword fighting to survive.
Hmm.
And I'd love to see a game adaptation of like a Souls-like game with this level of
Hmm.
like sci-fi slash Souls-like synthesis, which I don't think we've really seen that
Mm-hmm.
much of. We have like the Surge, which is kind of like this different sort of sci-fi portrayal. I've never
Hmm.
touched Surge because I'm not a big fan of Souls-likes in general. But
Mm-hmm.
I gotta wonder because like this is a Warner Brothers franchise, and Warner Brothers owns Rocksteady, and Rocksteady is like they made the Arkham
Hmm.
series, some of the best
Hmm.
action games ever.
Hmm.
And you gotta wonder could Warner Brothers get Rocksteady to make like a Dune adaptation that would be like really like super polished and super focused on
Yeah,
good action gameplay.
for sure. I mean, I think the problem with like a lot of sci-fi games or like cyberpunk genre games, not that Dune is cyberpunk, but like I
Yeah,
think the problem is that it's often like not actually this is like very counter to what I usually think about intellectual property, but I think like because a game like Cyberpunk, for example, because it's not based explicitly on a pre-existing intellectual property, they don't have it in them to actually come up with something original. So it's just a pure like it's all pastiche of like half-hearted references to like other stuff, being like, remember Blade Runner? Remember Ghost in the Shell? Remember like whatever fucking Neuromancer? Remember Johnny Mnemonic? Like it's
yeah,
all just like that. So it's just like these watered down, like half baked adaptations of other stuff, like in one thing. So it just feels like very soulless, kind of, from what I've seen, as
yeah.
opposed to
I
like,
mean that's
yeah,
definitely true of the
just to,
game.
yeah, like
But
I
like,
just think as
what's interesting about Cyberpunk is I think that the anime adaptation of the game has actually overtaken the original in terms of
I've
narrative
heard people say
originality.
that I've heard people say that it's a lot better and that it's like pretty cool.
Yeah, the problem with the game is there was actually an interview on this podcast I watched, Frames Per Second. They
Mm,
talked to the guy who I think executive produced slash like conceptualized the anime adaptation.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
basically, the problem with the Cyberpunk game is that it inherently is limited in narrative scope and thematic scope because it's like they have to cater to this power fantasy of being in the cyberpunk world, having like
Sure.
all these augmentations and just cool badass robot shit, mantis arms,
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the anime, they're obviously not limited by that because it's entirely portrayed as the creators want it to be. It's not like they have to make
Yeah. Yeah.
certain concessions to the gaming audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so the anime is much more focused on portraying like the oppression that comes with give like getting like a cyberpunk like a cybernetic modification and then going into
Mm-hmm.
debt to these companies that give it to you for the rest of your
Hmm.
life to have it, and then it shortens your lifespan, whatever.
Hmm.
It's much more faithful to portraying the cyberpunk ethos without really making concessions towards how games have to be.
Yeah, for sure. But I think also like a Dune game in that style, I think would also be refreshing because it won't just be like having to be like Edge Runner or whatever, like everything has to be now, which I personally like hate. So, uh, no offense to all the Edge Runner fans out there listening, but um,
I would really like to see a Dune game. I'm kind of worried. I guess it would fall into the same problem that Cyberpunk did, where because Dune is such a rich series in terms of its narrative and thematic and historical scope. I think
yeah,
Dune's like completely different from any other sci-fi story because it's
hmm
doesn't really focus on the sci-fi elements. It uses the sci-fi pretense to tell historical and human themes
hmm
and portray those stories in like emotionally captivating ways, and really focus on like the characters and the strategy and the dynamics of oppression that
yeah,
happen in these settings. I'm not sure a video game could capture that in the same way.
hmm
But
hmm
I would still like to see it because I think I'm just imagining like the setting and the combat just feels so right to me for like a melee focused action video game.
yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be
Anyway,
able to be
just
like. Go ahead. Never mind.
Warner Brothers makes games. Please, Warner
Hmm
Brothers, make this happen. I know lots of Warner Brothers executives watch this show, so please make this happen. Please make a Dune game that's not just an RTS. Please make an action game that's actually good.
Yeah.
Problem is that
The
Rocksteady is like the only studio I trust to make this game, and they're making the Suicide Squad game right now, which is like a live shooter co-op game, which is going to be complete dog. So
yeah,
that's
that
kind of
looked
out the window.
hilarious in trailers. What are you gonna do?
Yeah,
Yeah, one
so
day.
that's Dune.
Hmm
Movie delay bad. No game adaptation bad. Please fix those things, Warner Brothers. Please stop being a bad company.
hmm hmm
And yeah, and then we have Starfield, which is we kind of touched on this before, but basically, let's talk about the game. I know you don't really get the chance to play this game since you're on PlayStation, so I will be your sole ambassador for talking about Starfield for the next few weeks. This is
hmm
all you're gonna be This is all you're gonna be hearing about from me because I'm been playing the shit out of this game.
Be talking
Basically,
about
it's like
your moon rock collection.
if you know anything about Bethesda games, it's basically like super ambitious open world RPGs. They're like the biggest RPGs out there. They try to like
Yeah.
really capitalize on the open world setting to deliver lots of different role playing experiences and
hmm
characters and role playing options. Um, less so with Fallout 4 because Fallout 4 is more like the action focused one with less role playing elements.
hmm
But pretty much every other game they've made has been like that. And Starfield seems to be kind of like synthesizing these two aspects of their game design. They want to really
Yeah.
deliver like a lot of role playing options in terms of like the scope of what you can do and explore and see, and also just deliver like an exciting combat game where you can like fly around with the jet thrusters and shoot people with laser weapons.
hmm
So yeah, I'm really excited because I mean this game looks super polished. Obviously, I love the premise of like a space game where you can explore thousands of planets.
hmm
Obviously, it's not really made with the same level of polish as like a traditional open world because you cannot realistically polish that many worlds. It's like what they did with the game is they like procedurally generated thousands of planets and then went in and like hand tuned it to like add in like different settlements and stuff
Oh, yeah. There
and
you go.
different alien creatures.
Hmm
Whereas with a game like No Man's Sky, which is also procedurally generated, they just like ran like an algorithm to just make planets
Yeah. There's no
and just
tuning
kind
in
of let
that
it be
one.
auto populated and then you do what you want in it. Whereas
Hmm
with Starfield, it seems a lot more deliberate and they're trying to focus on delivering polished, high quality experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
Not that
I
No
mean,
Man's
that's
Sky is
yeah.
bad. That game is actually pretty fun now that it's been fully developed since
Hmm.
release. Like fucking 3 years in, they finally finished the game. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
right.
fine now. But yeah, Starfield looks like the sort of game that's going to be. It's either going to be like a game you play for 5 hours and then you drop and never play it again, or it's going to be a game you play for like 80 hours because it's
Yeah,
constantly captivating you to keep playing it.
totally. Yeah, I mean, if it delivers on what it says it's going to be, it definitely looks like extremely sick. Um, that's kind of my only contribution. It definitely,
Yeah,
reading about it and looking at the visuals reminds me of, I'm going to mention it for the third time today, Knights of the Old Republic, um, which very much like, yeah, RPG where like you have a variety of like different planets and like weird little hidden quests like in all of them that will take you to locations that you wouldn't normally see. And um, yeah, just feeling like so in depth. Um, yeah, and like there being different consequences for like doing planets in different orders. But I also think like, I don't know, this is like maybe only slightly related, but I often think about this in music, like, or in artwork, when to rely on improvisation and having things be like fully not planned. Um, and I think like only using procedural generation and not having like a human hand in planning things like is basically just like extremely problematic and also like boring and dull because people don't want like something that's made without like the spark of like human like intervention. You know
ingenuity.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like I think like, it's like with the graphics cards, like AI can be very useful as like a tool for like helping to like, you know, assist
optimize human
performance and like,
experiences.
yeah, exactly, or like fill in the gaps, but like it's not interesting to like
Yeah,
do something
you
to
gotta
like
have you gotta
experience
have
something that
the
hasn't been
core built
planned.
around human created works, and then use AI to supplement the rest of it. That seems like what
Yeah.
Starfield's trying to do. But
Yeah.
they have all these cities and these settlements and these like
Hmm.
spaceships, whatever. That's all going to be made
Yeah.
like handcrafted, obviously. And then the planets,
Hmm.
you have like they have the different planetary artwork that they've conceptualized. Obviously, I mean it's not that hard. It's like,
Hmm.
and then the planets themselves, like the surface of the planet's going to be AI generated, which is like perfectly fine. That seems perfectly
Yeah.
believable to me. You
Yeah,
don't need to
for
like
sure.
handcraft like the geometry of the world like in Death Stranding, for example, because that's not it's not the
Yeah.
game is not really about traversing, walking on the planet so much as it is about finding different settlements and finding different types of civilizations and
Yeah.
engaging with them on a role playing level.
Yeah, and it's also like, I mean, it in some ways like, features on a planet do exist kind of according to patterns based on like how things are built or like how geological like patterns happen. So it like
Yeah,
doesn't feel like it's gonna be completely alien. But what I think is so funny about sci-fi media and about something like Star Wars, for example, is that like every planet is like one biome, which I always think is kind of funny because it's like, okay, you have Earth, which is like some parts are like cold and snowy for parts of the year. Some parts are like a rainforest. Some parts are like this. But then in Star Wars, for example, it's like every planet is one biome. How is that even
yeah,
possible? Like, you know what
yeah.
I mean?
That's
Like,
basically
I
what
get
that's.
that. Like,
I guess that's the problem with like every space game is it's
yeah,
difficult to offer different experiences on the same planet
yeah,
realistically without
yeah.
like kind of suspending disbelief.
It's
Starfield's
one
going to have the same
biome and
problem where
one
every game is the
season.
where every planet's the same biome,
Yeah,
or each has their own individual biome.
yeah.
It's not a deal
It
breaker
for
for me. I mean, for the most part, like my main criticism of the game so far is it seems like there's going to be like out of bounds because on No Man's
mm-hmm.
Sky you can just like fly around the entire surface of the planet whenever
Yeah,
you land on
right.
any planet. But
Mm-hmm.
on Starfield, it's going to be like a 5 square kilometer radius where you can explore when you land on a planet, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because
I
there's
think
only
that's
so much
okay.
stuff that Bethesda can stuff into each world, like each
Yeah.
planet, before it becomes uninteresting. So yeah, it's fair.
Well, it's also that becomes completely overwhelming from an exploration standpoint of feeling like every time I go to a planet, I can just see the entire planet. I mean, that's fucked. That's like
Yeah,
that would take
because
so
on No
long.
Man's Sky, you were never really utilizing the whole planet to begin with. You were
Mm-hmm.
landing on a chunk of it. You get your resources. You fuck off. Go somewhere else.
Well, and I also think like on a more perceptual level, it's hard for us to conceptualize what it would even mean to like go to an entirely different like planet full of like a different world that is fully like I think we can only conceptualize like going to a different continent or like going to a different country, which is basically what the analog of like planets in Star Wars are, right? They're more like countries than they are like actual full new worlds at all. So,
Yeah,
and then we just think of
it's
like,
very difficult to imagine a
hmm
medium like a piece of art that could really capitalize on the full scope of exploring a whole different planet.
yeah,
Like
for
maybe
sure.
in 15 years we can see a game that will actually be able to fully do that, but it's going to be a long
Yeah.
time.
hmm hmm
Anyway, the last thing I'm very excited for is Starfield is like the aesthetic. It's like I love the like the NASA punk aesthetic they're
Yeah.
building in that game. It's kind of the same reason like Star Wars, as you said before, because Star Wars kind of feels like human beings building all these different settlements, kind of, and like what human beings would do in all these different sorts of environments and
hmm
the sort of cultures that exist in those environments.
Yeah.
And Starfield is going to be kind of the same way, where it's like it's like not that far in the future, like 150, 200 years in the future, what human beings would be doing within that time frame, and it wouldn't the divergence would not be completely alien in the sense that like human beings would still share the same languages, kind of, and
Mm.
still operate on the same cultural norms, but they'd be exploring different environments and trying different civilizations, different cultures within those contexts. So
Mm.
that's all very interesting to me, and the aesthetic looks very grounded and believable within that context, and not completely alien yet.
Yeah. I would say it actually doesn't look punk at all. I would say it just looks like, because it's not super stylized. It's more like kind of,
Yeah,
it
I
looks
guess
more
NASA
like
punk is kind of like
believable.
an
You know what I mean?
oxymoron because it's like realistic punk.
Yeah. Like I think cyberpunk is like like I think that name comes from it being like so exaggeratedly stylized and unbelievable that it like seeps into its own realm of like, uh, I don't want to use the word camp necessarily, but camp basically. But Starfield, I think, looks more like it's trying for like more of like a realistic immersion as opposed to like a cartoony immersion or something like that. So,
Yeah,
which is good. I think it's good. Not everything needs to be.
I'm on board with it. Yeah, not everything
Yeah,
needs to be Star Wars.
yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
Certainly not because, especially because still 50% of media still is Star Wars. So I think it's like we certainly don't need Star Wars in things that aren't branded as such. You know what I mean? Let Star Wars do Star Wars. We certainly have enough of it already.
just as we were recording this, Donkey put out the Armor Core 6 Dunk View, which
I'm
is
not going to be able to watch it yet though because I feel like it's going to have spoilers.
no, probably not. I don't think it would honestly, but maybe just like slight clips that are like spoilers, kind of, but not really describing spoilers.
I
Which I think
think
is
every
honestly
boss,
fine.
I think every boss I've fought so far was in the trailer, so I not much has been a surprise so far. Um, but yeah, I'm wondering. I was just thinking about like how long is it going to be before we get Donkey Armored Core content? Um,
I mean, it's FromSoftware. Who's going to make a video on it?
yeah.
I'm sure they'll
Well,
have nice things to say.
He doesn't. He doesn't have a Dark Souls 2 video, so I don't know,
Oh,
man.
that's true. Yeah. I mean,
It's a
probably for the
crime,
best. You
honestly.
probably tear that game to shreds, but yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I
I feel
guess
like he would
what I like
appreciate the
about Donkey's
slapstick
videos so
elements.
much. Yeah, you go first.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. That's all I was going to say. Is just that he would like
I
the slapstick element and like the comedy.
Yeah, that's true. That's probably what he'd highlight the most.
Yeah.
What I like about Donkey's videos so much is like his reviews are kind of different from any other game YouTuber reviewers stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Donkey really puts in the effort to like he kind of like makes his reviews like essay style. Most game reviewers kind of
Yeah.
like give like a complete overview of like what the game is like, whereas Donkey
Mm-hmm.
kind of like cherry picks specific examples that really highlight his points and get you on board with his
Mm-hmm.
viewpoint. I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
kind of like I appreciate his content, even though it's not really like as objective as other YouTubers are. His videos and his reviews especially are very much focused on trying to use narrative elements or like argumentative elements to
Yeah, for sure.
prescribe a specific setting or specific viewpoint of a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, as he says in his like 2-part series about game critics, like he's not going for like he is not trying to present as objective. He's trying to present as like I have certain priorities that you get used to as you watch my channel. So like, not everyone is going to agree with how I approach things. But also, I mean, I've been talking to a friend of mine about Donkey videos because I like watched the Death Stranding ones after I finished the game, and he does this with other games. Like he did this with Neo and like a couple other ones where it's very clear that he's like sort of choosing to not engage with certain mechanics that are in the game and like sort of not exactly playing it wrong, but playing it from the perspective of like a casual in his like gameplay footage where you're like,
Yeah,
well, sure, this part of Death Stranding isn't working for you, but that's because like that's not what you're supposed to do in that part, you know, like you're not supposed to be able to scale up this
Yeah.
cliff like this, you know. But so on one
It's
level I'm
like when he
like,
doesn't like a game, he'll
it's
just
funny.
intentionally play it shitty.
Exactly. But I appreciate it because I'm like, well, this is how, like, you know, I think it's fair to, like, that's him sort of substituting in like an average person's playthrough for, like, you know what, like, for example, even when you watch the Elden Ring video, which is a game that he likes, like, he's clearly like playing it kind of dumb on purpose, like for comedic value
Yeah.
and to like show, I think, what the experience of like an average player would be, as opposed to like someone who's like played every Dark Souls game, or like, you know, is doing it, is like good at the game, or has played the game like 3 times already. So
Yeah.
like, in that sense, I think it's a very interesting approach to, like, because a lot of people are either like already very much on the side of the game and the developers, or they're like totally against it. But I think he's able to like still poke fun even when he likes something.
Yeah, I definitely
But yeah,
prefer his reviews where he likes games more than the ones where he dislikes them, because he's much better at
yeah,
presenting cases for why
for
you should
sure.
like a game versus why you should dislike a game.
Yeah, I mean, I like it when he is mean about stuff, for sure. But I also think it's like, yeah, I don't know. I feel both ways. I like started watching his like 2-part review of those, like, what's that guy's name? I forget the director, but like Whiplash and La La Land, and I had to turn it off because I was like, I actually kind of hate this. It's like too positive. I think these movies are stupid and like really one-dimensional. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, all the stuff you're picking out in them that's good is like incredibly obvious and like not worth making a whole movie built around. Especially La La Land, because it's like 3 hours or something. But anyway, that's fine. You know, that wasn't a deal breaker for me. He's allowed to like those movies, and his reasons for liking them are not invalid or anything like that. But yeah, I think I like him equally when he's enthusiastic and when he's being mean. Because I think some of his like being mean to games
Yeah.
footage is
For me, I
incredibly
tend
funny.
to like, for the most part, I've never like disagreed. There's very few times where I've disagreed with videos where he likes
Mhm.
a game, because usually the games he likes are the same
Mhm.
games I like. But there's plenty of
Yeah.
times where I disagree with where he's dislike games that I like. I think that's pretty common. I guess the one time is like
Yeah,
Last
for
of Us
sure.
2, which is, for most gamers, that was the time they like really broke off from Dunkey. I loved Last of Us 2, so I totally sympathize with his review.
Oh, did he not like
But I
it?
think most gamers probably got that. No, he loved Last of Us 2.
Oh, he
But
did.
like most
Okay.
gamers hate that game. So like, yeah,
Oh, I
that was
see.
like the time where most of the audience like despised him.
Hmm.
So I
I
guess that was
thought.
like culture shock for most gamers, kind of.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah, I think we could probably agree he's operating at the highest tier when he's sort of in chaotic neutral, as opposed to like chaotic evil or chaotic good, or like neutral good, you know? Like, I
Yeah,
think when he's like playing random games from like Steam or whatever, like just like random shitty games where he's not even saying they're bad or good, but he's just sort of going through them and being insane, like
just
Gun
showing what they
Golf
look like.
or Cruelty Squad or whatever, like just the sort of pure showcase ones, I think are sort of in some cases where he's like shines the most. But wow, so this just sort of immediately turned into, instead of talking about Armored Core, we're just fully talking about we're just doing
No, this is
donkey
game
analysis.
discussion. This is the
Yeah,
open. This is the open
gaming content
segment.
discussion. It's just sick to me
Yeah,
that he
but
has like such a big audience. It's like, I feel like that's one thing. Like, usually whenever I spend time on, especially like the gaming part of the internet, I'll just be like, man, it's so bleak and like it's just so horrible. But then when I see
uninspired.
that like random ass donkey videos are all in the multi-million views, I'm like, okay, something, it's, people are good, you know what I mean, on
Yeah,
some level, like, you know what I mean.
a lot of the gaming media content is just like incredibly bland and uninspired, and just
Yeah,
focused on casting the widest net possible. So it's good to see people
yeah,
like Donkey that are pushing the envelope and making sure that is that what that means? Pushing envelope means the opposite of what I think it means.
yeah. No,
Trying to say
well,
that
you're saying,
Donkey is good at innovating basically and
yeah,
presenting new
totally,
ideas.
and not
Yeah. So
being
but
afraid to
Donkey.
like disagree or like make
Yeah.
people mad or whatever, you know what I mean. Like, I recently watched that video where he's like making fun of that like 100 Thieves or whatever it's called, what, like the cat,
Yeah.
their
What's
the
up,
like
Twitch chat?
the hype house or whatever. It's so funny. and like I think that video is like kind of foundational for me in understanding him, because it's him sort of staking a claim of being like, this is the kind of gaming media that I make and this is the kind that I don't make.
Yeah. There's other
Which is
people
cool.
that also are making like innovative content. You have like
Yeah.
Nakey Jakey, one of my favorite game content creator people.
Mm-hmm.
Nakey Jakey makes really good game analysis videos, even though I disagree with a lot of his takes about games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Last of Us 2,
Mm.
which are some of my favorite games ever. He hates those games. Well, he doesn't hate them, but
Mm-hmm.
he just has problems with them,
Yeah.
which I don't have. Um, yeah, Nakey Jakey's a big one. I'm just looking through my subscriptions here, see if I can find any more I can just list off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
I have 300 subscriptions on YouTube that I never watch.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd say Nike Jakey's big on the analysis side of things.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
usually watch videos about game. I did watch one randomly about Tekken 4 recently that I was pleasantly surprised with sort of the level of analysis that was going on in it. But I usually, if I'm going to watch gaming content, I just watch speedruns. Right now I'm really into tool assisted speedruns. Have you ever watched those? I'm sure you have.
I love task videos. Yeah, they're really
They're
interesting.
so much fun. Oh my god.
Yeah,
There's like so much going on
I also
to
like
like
I
unpack.
like Girlfriend Reviews and Skill Up. They're both pretty good game reviewers. They have unique
Mm-hmm.
styles. I think they both kind of fall into the umbrella of like objective gaming review content. Kind of, they're just trying to provide a summary. But I
Yeah.
think Skill Up and Girlfriend Reviews both offer like unique takes on things and try to focus on conceptualizing their opinions in a way that's more compelling to watch
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
versus other game reviewers.
I
There's plenty of examples. I mean, you have stuff like Ratatosker, who I disagree. I disagree with almost all of his videos, but he has some really good points to make about From Software games.
hmm.
He's pretty small though, so he's not a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I wish there were more game reviewers like Donkey, because I think that's kind of an undervalued aspect of the medium, talking
Yeah.
about games in a way that's like argumentative and innovative, and not just like providing a summary.
Yeah.
We should see more of that in the YouTube sphere.
I mean, I hate Robert Christgau, but he is basically the Robert Christgau of gaming, which I think heretofore like has not existed ever at all, to my knowledge. But because I was going to say, I wish there were people like Dunkey who reviewed music, or like art, but we kind of have that for art a little bit. But I do think like for music, that's kind of like a dying breed, because now it's like either people who are like, I don't know.
People
It's
with
like
music reviews are just like, oh, it's subjective, so think whatever you want, and just like not really content to try to make an argument.
no, not. I mean, I more think it's like
I'm not
so
really a
much.
big music reviewer.
We don't need to get into it. I just think it's like,
Fair
I mean,
enough. This is a whole
it's
other can of worms.
yeah, it's like IGN reviews or something, where it's like just press releases basically, as opposed to reviews.
Yeah,
Or you have people who are like trying to just overly intellectualize everything where it's not called for,
right.
and like not really warranted or something. But anyway, we don't need to get into it. But yes, we do. We love Donkey. We endorse Donkey.
Yeah, and then the other YouTuber I just thought of was The Escapist, which is actually not really just one person. It's like a whole team of people.
I don't know if I
But
know that one.
there's this series they do on The Escapist YouTube channel called Zero Punctuation, which is basically like really fast-paced game reviews that are kind of
Oh,
like
cool.
in the same vein of Donkey, where they present specific examples. I don't think it's as effective as Donkey's is, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still pretty entertaining, and they make good points in those videos. Maybe not to the extent of like explaining their argument so much as just like making comedic turns of phrase to try to accentuate their points or their thoughts.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like that series a lot.
Nice. Yeah, that
Anyway,
sounds
that's
entertaining.
our gaming YouTube roundup. Let's talk more about Armored Core 6, big robot
Let's.
game.
I'm so ready. I've thoughts.
I think
Although
you
I'm
played this game more
also.
than I have.
I think you're farther, but I might have had more hours in.
I've only played it. I've been playing it every other day because I've been playing
Mm,
games on some days and then moving in, kind of like going out, buying stuff, getting set up in
totally.
British Columbia on other
Right.
days.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
that's just
I've
you're
made
going
it all the
shopping
way
in
to
the
like
game. You're going
mid
shopping in
chapter
real
3.
life. Oh, I'm in mid
By
chapter
the
three
way,
too. Okay.
if you're listening to this podcast, this is probably where you should like stop watching if you don't want to get spoiled for Armored Core 6. We're gonna be
Oh,
talking about
yes.
hella spoilers.
Or unless if you haven't gotten to chapter 3 or whatever, then yeah. Um,
Yeah, that's where you would want to not watch anymore.
yeah, I just finished doing like those first 3 missions in chapter 3. So we're like roughly in the same place.
I just beat up the duo where it's like The
Yeah,
system gave its verdict. Immediate termination.
me too. Yeah, I just did that part.
The PCA
That was
guys.
fun.
Yeah. Okay, so we're both in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so far I think the hardest thing in the game for me was still the tutorial boss because the loadout you have just sucks ass for it, and the only thing you have that
Yeah.
can do damage is the sword.
Right.
And it's just like so fucking punishing. Uh,
Right.
like I think I probably like Baltius took me more tries, but like I don't think Baltius
I
because
understood that you understand that boss more by the time you get
yeah,
there, right?
because once you beat Baltius, it's like, oh, I get how it works. But the helicopter was just like, it's just a
You have no
complete
idea what you're doing.
crapshoot. If yeah,
I was
exactly.
fighting more with the controls than I was fighting the boss in that first
Yeah,
run through because
absolutely.
I got Armored Core 6 on PC, whereas I play most games on PS5. So
Oh, you've been playing on PC. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because they advertise the 120 frames per second, which is like that's
Ooh,
a
that's
huge
pretty
selling point for
sexy.
me because
Okay,
this is the
cool.
sort of game I want to be higher than 60 FPS on,
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
and it runs really smoothly on PC. So yeah.
Now, what's the highest frame rate that like is perceivable by people? Like, what do we max out at?
So basically, researchers. I don't know if this is. I don't want to say researchers. That sounds pretentious. But basically, I think they figured out that like human eye runs at 240 frames per second, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Okay, so we
I
still have a
mean,
little ways to go before
there's
we
plenty
max
of
out.
gamers that play higher than that. Like most people play esports titles like CS:GO or Valorant at like 360 FPS, for
Wow.
example.
Okay. Damn.
But yeah, I think if you've seen like 90 FPS before, that looks a lot smoother than 60 FPS in my opinion. But like I think 60 FPS is
Yeah.
still like fairly smooth. Where for 90% of action games, that's going to be pretty playable. For
Yeah.
a game like Armored Core 6, where there's like tons of different particle effects on screen and there's missiles flying around, a bunch of different
Mm-hmm.
enemies, it's like very fast paced game. That's the sort of game where I want higher than 60 FPS. But I think for most action games,
Yeah.
it's like one-on-one fights, sword slashing. That's like perfectly playable at 60 FPS.
I'm usually playing Among Us at around 400, 450. So,
Yeah, I'm running my RTX 4090s cranking out Among
uh-huh.
Us at 3000
Yep.
FPS, 8K resolution,
Yep.
ray tracing ultra,
Uh-huh.
DLSS.
It's pretty good for the sex scenes. Honestly, it's makes them like a lot more titillating. Yeah, I mean, I'm like torn because I think like on the one hand, I saw this like clickbait headline when Armored Core first came out, being like people are upset that it's not actually like the Souls. It's not actually Souls with robots like it was advertised as, but actually there are. I mean, the boss fights are very Souls. They're very
Yeah,
Sekiro. But
it's
what I
actually one
like,
of the main criticisms I've seen about the game on Steam. You go first, though.
yeah, well, I guess like I have like a whole thing about it, but like I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess there are ways in which it reminds me of Sekiro, but like I think it is the very obvious difference is that like in Sekiro there's basically one right answer to like how to do the fight and how to respond to like when you get the beeping red dot on screen, whereas in Armored Core like beyond build or anything with customization, even just within gameplay, like you get the warning that like a homing attack is coming, and like there's a bunch of different things that you could do to avoid that, like beyond even like pressing the square button, which to me is just like I don't know. I guess the reason why I like gaming in general right now in life is because it's helpful for me to have like an activity where there's like an established end goal objective thing and it's within a constrained system, because like everything else that I do is so like completely open-ended, and like video games like answer a question, but like making art is more like just a different way of articulating a question or something. So it's for me like I like having a little bit of both in the game, where like within this closed framework there are a lot of different ways to get from point A to point B. But I mean that's even in like fighting Millennia at level 1 or something, is like there is also more than one way that you could do that. There's more than one way you can respond to that like attack
Kind of.
pattern
I
or
mean,
whatever. So
there's different weapon setups that offer different stagger
mhm.
values, but I think for the most part, there's only one right way to dodge each move.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and I mean also when it comes to PvP, like I've had like a mixed experience. Like when I played online with random people, I felt very much like, okay, there is like an objective way to just like overwhelm the person. Like you just use every weapon you have is just plasma AoE. So like
Kind of
it's just
just
a
like
matter of
find
time.
ways to manage their stamina, their stagger bar, and just save up your best attacks for when they're staggered.
Right, but then I fought Mythos a couple times, and like even though he's like much farther in the game and has like more experience and more weapons, there were a couple matches where it was very close, and I did feel like it was doable without me knowing anything about like meta for PvP. So I think I just
Yeah,
get like
it feels a lot more
tired.
balanced.
Yeah, for sure. Like I like when there's options. Like even with the one game that or whatever, I like for like a year I got really into Magic the Gathering Arena, and like there was a season where I got to Mythic ranked with an off meta deck, which is like I think my goal in any, you know, PvP setting is to like not like I'm breaking the meta or something like so
I'm
self-absorbed as
different.
saying that, like I'm different, but I'm like interested in figuring out like okay, how do you like I guess what I'm doing is still meta because it's like okay, the deck that I built just like shuts down all the other possible things that are in the meta, but like I like that it feels doable to still like there's more of a mix of not necessarily just skill,
Trying to
but
find something
like
original.
yeah, there's like enough variety even at the place where I'm at in the game where like there's enough different build types where it's not monopolized by like one particular thing that's like completely gonna win every single time in every situation, you know?
Right. Yeah, I feel like with Armored Core 6, like most other Souls games kind of have like a prescribed reaction to each attack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Armored Core 6, it's kind of just like general trends of how you react to things. And it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the skill system kind of comes from like learning how to use your own skills to apply them to different move sets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because with Armored Core 6, it's like, you have melee attacks you have to dodge and range attacks and AoE attacks. And there's not really any one answer to dodge any of them. It's kind of just like
Yeah.
managing your stamina well, using your dodges, managing your weapon cooldown times
Mm-hmm.
to handle each boss appropriately and not run out of anything before you get killed.
Yeah, totally. Um
It's very stressful trying to keep track of your health bar and having to worry about how many hits you can tank and how much more
mm-hmm.
shit you can take before the boss's stagger bar finally breaks or whatever. It's a really good
Yeah.
system. I like it, and a lot of people don't like it, which is interesting to me. I guess the main controversy or contention with this game comes from the fact that it's like not really Armored Core, because most Armored Core games it's like you have one fixed AP bar for the entire
Mm.
mission.
Mm-hmm.
You have one fixed ammo bar. You have a certain amount of ammo for when you start the mission. It doesn't get replenished.
Oh,
You have to
so they don't
manage
like the
that stuff
Sherpas or whatever?
all the way through the level to the boss fight. Whereas with Armored Core
Mm-hmm.
6, it's like you get a checkpoint after every section. There's a checkpoint before the boss.
Yeah.
There's a resupply cabinet before the boss. You just
Yeah.
you get to the end of the level, you fight the boss. You can keep repeating the boss until you win. So it's like the
Right.
bosses
You can
and the
even
areas
rebuild
and
like a mid boss fight.
yeah, you can rebuild exactly. It's like very
Yeah.
modular and it's very very much
Mm-hmm.
forgiving in how you approach it.
Forgiving.
And that's I think for most people that's the main criticism of the game. It's like it's very different from other Armored Core games in that regard. So people who
Right. I
bought so
mean,
it's kind of like the problem with the game. I think for me, it's not really a problem for me because I really enjoy it. But I think the
mm-hmm.
problem for most people is that it doesn't really appeal to either side very well. It doesn't appeal to like Souls fans that like want to
Mm-hmm.
have like a Souls like mech game. It doesn't really appeal
Yeah.
to classic Armored Core fans that want to have like a sequel to those games.
Yeah.
It does both, and I think it does both pretty well. But
Yeah.
obviously, you can't appeal to either side 100%.
No,
I
for
really, I
sure.
really like the checkpoint system. I like being able to respec my character and try different builds. It's fun.
Yeah. It
Each
feels
boss
like
fight
in
kind of
some
feels
ways,
like a challenge, and you just keep going at it until you win.
yeah, like it there are ways in which like the Souls games feel like really punishing, but this one doesn't feel like I mean, I just feel like the difficulty of some of the bosses and areas is high enough that I don't need there to also be this element of like, oh, I also have to like worry about how much money I'm going to make every single time and like doing the whole rest of the level again to get there. Like there's not like a necessary run back unless I want to go shopping.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm
Um,
being honest, if this game didn't have the checkpoints, it'd be harder than like every Souls game put together.
yeah, I mean, what I wonder about is like, do people consider like the bosses in this game like more difficult or around the same level of difficulty as like previous
I
Armored
mean,
Core
if you
games?
think if I'm trying to imagine like beating Balteus, having to restart the level every time I die, it would take me like weeks. That
Yeah,
fight, I died like 50 times in that fight, just repeating the checkpoint over and over again.
yeah,
Like
that
if this game didn't have checkpoints, it would really suck.
yeah.
So I can understand why they're there. And I think the boss fights in this game are just harder than most other Souls games bosses for the most part, except for like the DLC bosses maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Because like
for
most other
sure.
Souls games, there's like very simple move sets with telegraphing, and it's like one attack at a time for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Armored Core 6, Balteus is fucking firing off missiles, flamethrowers,
Mm-hmm.
rockets flying at you. You know, he's
Yeah.
flying around the arena. So much shit you gotta
Yeah.
manage. It's like, and you gotta manage your own moveset too, where it's like you gotta keep track of your weapon, ammo, cooldown, stamina,
Mm-hmm.
all that shit. Yeah.
Well, and like I also think the stagger system is like, well, what it made me think of is like, how come in Elden Ring we can't have a visible like a visible stagger bar
Yeah.
for all the?
Elden
It's because they
Ring
wouldn't
kind
be
of
able to reveal
suffers
that.
from like
They wouldn't be
Elden
able
Ring
to
kind
show
of
us
suffers
that.
from being like the Soulsborne sequel, right? It's kind of got to be in the same vein of that stuff with the same
Yeah.
aesthetic design
Yeah.
of how the UI is to you. It's got to be like minimalist, toned down. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason they don't show it, but I think the reason's kind of rooted in like this preconceived expectation of like what
Yeah,
a
for
Souls
sure.
game is.
But what's
Like
also
The
cool is
problem is
like,
Elden Ring's trying to do new innovations like the stagger bar and the jump button
mm-hmm.
without really fully capitalizing on them like they did in Sekiro. Because Sekiro was like a completely new game. They were able to fully utilize the UI to display how these new
Mm-hmm.
mechanics worked.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Elden Ring was like, okay, it's like kind of like this spiritual successor to Dark Souls. So it has to look
Mm-hmm.
like, it has to feel like Dark Souls when you're playing it. So
Mm-hmm.
we can't really show
Mm-hmm.
the stagger bar or the jump indicator.
Yeah. I guess the other thing, maybe someone might disagree with this, but like, I guess I feel like what's also cool as opposed to Sekiro, I feel like this makes me sound like I don't like Sekiro, but uh, in Armored Core 6, you also don't have to use the stagger bar. You don't have to think about it. Like, it's important to keep it in mind, but in
Yeah.
Sekiro it's like if you don't stagger the boss, you will not beat the boss. But in Armored Core 6 it's much more realistic to win based on chip damage. Like, I'll accidentally stagger enemies in the arena sometimes, but like it's rarely like the most important thing to me, because usually what I'm doing, my
Yeah.
particular strategy with the most recent round of arena has just been like just using therapist and napalm gun to like just AoE people to shit or whatever, instead of like bothering to like, get them to stagger and then doing a melee thing, because I just got sort of tired of doing that for the first part of the game. So it's cool to me that there are alternate strategies. Although I think what's good about Sekiro is how linear it is, but I think the criticism of that is that it becomes like Guitar Hero or something, where it's like, you just figure out how to respond in the right way to the right thing with the right button, and like then you win.
There's no overarching like requirements for how to fight things in Armored Core, which is definitely refreshing for a Souls for a From Software game.
Yeah, and then in
Because in
terms of
Sekiro,
like,
it's like each attack has like a specific input you have to respond to with, whereas Armored Core is like, okay, there's a sweep attack coming. Do what you want to do, bro. Do your
yeah,
thing.
totally. Well, and then which is like, Sekiro is good at doing that in its own way, and like, if you like that, you like that. If you don't, you don't. But and I mean, just aesthetically and story wise, like, I just think Armored Core is basically perfect. It's like exactly what I want, and it's like doing late '90s, early 2000s aesthetic so perfectly. Just seems situated in that game series, which feels very hip now because that stuff is very like in style now. So,
Yeah.
I went that video that I mentioned that I watched about Tekken 4, because that's like the Tekken game I had when I was a kid that I had to like beg my parents to buy because it was rated T or something, or maybe even M. But like, they're just talking about how like the menu layout in it is very like cyberpunk, or like feels like Ghost in the Shell or something, where it's like you're inside the system and you're getting stuff downloaded to you. But so Armored Core 6 also feels like that, because the whole time, like every time you get a message, it has to be like, one new notification. This, like, you're just trapped looking at the screen, like it's just your actual field of view. So yeah, I'm just like totally head over heels, like in love with the entire presentation, and makes me feel like I'm in a production IG anime, partially because I'm playing in Japanese, but yeah, I think it's fucking sick. I feel like it's gonna just,
I don't have time to look at the subtitles while I'm fighting things, so I can play
that's the
English.
problem, is I've missed a lot of like lore because like I'm not able to
There's
process
not a lot.
like,
It's basically just like it's like Rubicon Liberation for like free Rubicon. We're Coral Fighters, and then like the corporations are like, we're so cool, you
Why
guys
don't
suck, and then
yeah, why
the
don't you
PCA
guys
is
go
like, you
have
guys
a
all suck.
sewing?
We're the best.
Yeah, totally. But I love the voice acting.
Yeah, but
so.
as you said before with the stagger bar, it's like what I like about Armored Core is like there are different builds that can utilize the mechanics in different ways. Like there are builds that can like really focus on staggering enemies and only focus on getting those posture breaks to get insane damage in. And there's also builds that can just like focus on like persistent damage without having to use the stagger bar. So there's a lot more there's just a lot more freedom in general in how you approach the game. And it never
definitely.
really feels like there's one prescribed option, which is definitely refreshing. So that's the quality I like the most about it. I think a lot of people who are criticizing the game don't like that stuff because they want like one approach that works and it makes it very clear what you have to do. So having that level of experimentation might be too much for some people, where there's you kind of have to play around and figure out what works for you and what works for each boss fight and replay it a few times to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think just, a lot of people would say that like the game is too reliant on one thing or the other when it should be like more accessible and open for everyone. But I think the fact that it's like not accessible really incentivizes, well, that sounds like that's like a dickhead saying that. Less accessible in the sense that like, it forces the player to experiment and find things that work and not just like beat everything on their first try, which is like another option that could have happened. But I think having the option for experimentation there and just being able to replay the boss fights as many times as you need to win, and then being able to go back through the missions however many times you want, is just a really great system for accessibility without making it too explicit or too simple or straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's also not like Elden Ring where you can get completely overpowered at any time that you want to, or even like any other Souls game where if you want to just grind,
it's interesting.
you
like,
can get
basically
overpowered.
the base starting stats are like the stats you kind of have for the rest of the game. It never gets like, there's not like any huge power scaling things where like other Souls games have.
Yeah, the like OS tuning maxes out at like 15% or something. It's not huge.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the one exception, but even that's not even that dramatic.
Yeah, I guess like, shoot, I forgot what I was. Oh yeah, it feels like it comes from an earlier era of video games, which is really fun to me. Like in like the way exploration is implemented, I think is really satisfying, even more so than an open world game, because you are locked into these missions that have like, limited areas where you are and they're all linear. But then when you do wander off and like find a hidden part or like a hidden battle log, it feels so much more special than when you like are just completely numbed to like the work that's involved in like needing to explore like a giant open map or whatever, where you're just constantly doing that and like not really being rewarded with anything interesting. So when you do like, when I did the like escape from the collapsing coral cave or whatever mission, like, and then I like completely accidentally found like a plasma rifle on my way out because I got lost. I was like, oh, wow, like cool.
Yeah,
like,
I saw that path too. And like that's not the right way. I'm going the wrong way. So I just turned around and didn't get that. I have to go through again. And get that.
Yeah, I just got completely turned around. But in that sense, like having things that are hidden on a smaller scale, it just reminds me of like an older style of game.
Yeah, it definitely feels very nostalgic.
Yeah,
and it feels a lot more video gamey, which is it's good and bad. I mean, I do have to disagree with you. I think I obviously prefer the exploration of like a synchronous, uninterrupted world like in a Souls game or Elden Ring a lot more.
Sure,
that sort of exploration just feels a lot more immersive to me.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And I think that's a criticism for most people, but it's not really a problem for me. I enjoy the mission style. I enjoy being able to replay missions whenever I want. It just feels really good. It's just gameplay centric. There's no compromises made for like the sake of immersion to like take away your options and what you want to do.
Right. I mean, compared to like, the good and bad thing is if we compare it to like a Souls game, or especially Elden Ring, if you beat a boss,
you're done.
If you want to fight it again, you just got to wait until you play the game again. But then the problem is like,
at which point the difficulty is ruined.
Yeah, if you want to get like more currency or you want to buy new parts, it's like you can't just keep progressing forward at a certain point. You have to just go back and do things over and over and over again. Versus in Elden Ring or like an open world game, like, oh, I need more levels. I don't have to go like, fight Morgott 6 times. Like I could go do this optional side area and like get my levels and my items and my upgrade materials from there instead, So
yeah, having the immersive like synchronous worlds of a Souls game, it's obviously it sacrifices a bit of that modularity and replayability for the sake of immersion and having like a continuous role playing experience kind of.
Yeah.
Armored Core can't really do that, but it does offer more in terms of like gameplay accessibility. But also, it
Hmm.
sacrifices a bit of that immersion and feeling of constant progression that Souls games have.
Yeah. But I
So
mean, I
yeah,
don't know.
there's ups and downs to both sides of it. I think Armored Core doesn't. I can't really criticize Armored Core for doing something different. It definitely still works in the context of what it's trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think the alternative is like Metal Gear Solid 5, right? Where it's like an open world game where you can then accept missions within it. And from there, you're like limited to certain areas of the map. Um,
No, not really. I mean, I'd say Metal Gear 5 is pretty much a direct analog to what Armored Core 6 does. I mean, all the missions are completely replayable whenever you want,
no, that's what I'm
and all
saying.
the
It's like
areas
the
are like,
alter
yeah, it's different from Souls
yeah.
games.
The alternative would
It's an
be
open world game though.
like if Armored Core 6 also had an element where you could freely roam around
Yeah.
between the
I mean,
mission
if I'm being
areas, like
honest,
between
not
the
you make that
missions.
comparison. I definitely prefer Metal Gear 5 for that. I like the fact that it has an open world, even if
Oh,
it's
it's
not
awesome.
necessarily
Yeah.
as like used as Elden Rings is. It's like
Hmm.
having the option to free roam and just like find shit in the world is really nice compared to Armored Core 6, where it's like
Yeah,
you go in, you got to do this one thing, then you get out.
it's so sick. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm all
it would be
about it
nice
for
if Armored
sure.
Core 6 could do that, but I can understand why it's not an option because I would
Yeah.
just kind of add an unnecessary burden on the dev team to connect all these
Yeah.
different levels, which I don't think is necessary.
It would be 3 times the game. And also, I think like you only being like let out to do missions and not being having freedom of your own is part of like what the
Yeah,
situation in the
it
game is
ties back
supposed
into
to
the story
be.
of the
So,
game.
yeah, I think like you being somewhat like on a leash, so to speak, is sort of like, that's like part of the immersion or something like that. You know what I mean? Um, so I don't know. I mean, it's like it doesn't like fully go there, but like I think it like works for what it's trying to be very
Yeah.
successfully. But
Anyway,
I
I do
have
have a
I've
few
been
criticisms of the game,
yeah. Go ahead.
but do you want to go first? Okay.
No, I haven't really thought of much yet. So you
So
go ahead.
basically, my main problem is like there's a few like niche mechanics. They're not niche. They're actually very central to the game's
Mm-hmm.
systems
Mm-hmm.
that are not explained very well at all. Like this whole system with like the load and the EN load.
Oh yeah.
These things are critical to how much you can jump around, how your stamina regenerates, how
Mm-hmm.
your character operates in the systems of the game. The game makes very little effort to tell you
Yeah.
how equipping stuff in the
Basically
garage
none. Yeah.
affects your gameplay. It's
Mm-hmm.
very obscure, and you have to figure it out on your own. It's also kind of an issue in Souls games, but I feel like in Souls games it's a lot simpler to understand. Like you have if you have medium load, you have medium load. You can medium roll. You have a stamina bar, you know how much endurance you have.
Yeah.
There's no ambiguity about how equipping stuff or upgrading your stats affects your character.
Yeah.
Whereas in Armored Core 6, it's like if your load bar is over a certain point, your stamina generation is shot to hell, and it doesn't tell you because it still says it's like acceptable load. You can still go out on missions with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I didn't even
There's
know
no
that actually.
distinction made. Yeah, exactly. I found this out from Mythos. He explained this to me because I was like, why is my stamina regenerating so slowly? I'm meeting
Yeah.
the EN load requirements. My
Mm-hmm.
EN recharge rate is good. Like, there's actually like a very niche system where it's like certain parts, like thrusters and generators, have like a lightweight or like medium weight or heavyweight load
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
descriptor, and that's
Yeah.
actually what tells you how those equipment pieces interact with your gameplay.
Yeah, well,
It
then
just
isn't there
it's
also like there's like an ideal weight recharge or something like that?
Yeah, but it's not explained at all. It's like
Yeah.
this super central system to the game's core mechanics that is not explained at all by the game.
Oh yeah, I mean
Anyway,
I've had this like PC invasion tab open the whole time I've been playing that actually like breaks down what every single stat is.
yeah,
Just because I
I've
like.
tried to avoid all that stuff on purpose because
Oh
I want
really?
to try to
Okay.
figure it out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the game has made very little effort to explain that, which I think is a shame because I think
Yeah.
there's already so many menus and there's so much
Mm-hmm.
information out there, and so
Yeah.
much of it is just not relevant to how the gameplay actually works. It's just like filler
Mm-hmm.
stuff that just makes it seem more advanced than it actually is.
Yeah, for
Whereas
sure.
the stuff that actually does matter is not really touched on that much by the game's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
menus or tutorials.
Yeah.
The core systems are perfectly fine. Like I really enjoy the jumping and stamina, the recharge. I just wish that they could have done more to explain it better. In the context of how your build affects that stuff,
Yeah, for sure. There should
because
have been like more of a
it's all
building
fairly
tutorial.
central to the gameplay, but not explained very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then it's just like, I
And
mean, it's similar to like some of those obscure quest lines in FromSoft games where it's like, you know, you are only going to figure this out if you Google it. Like, it will take you like
Yeah, but it's not
hundreds
like a
of
quest line that
thousands of
gives you an item.
hours
It's
to
like a
like.
central mechanic of the game. So it's like
Yeah,
less
it's
excusable in this
worse. Yeah.
situation to me.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
okay with having like obscure quests in FromSoft games if it's like just like an item you get.
Yeah.
It's not essential to beating the game. It's just a fun thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's less forgivable. Imagine if like Sekiro didn't have like a menu that explained how Mikiri counters worked, for example. You're
Yeah,
just
for
completely
sure.
clueless the whole time.
Uh huh.
That would
Uh huh.
suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine
So
not
yeah,
knowing how to do
that's one
Mikiri
thing I don't
counters.
like. And then I guess the other thing was I had something to say. You go first, and I'll think of it.
I was just joking that I'm very bad with Mikiri counters and basically
Yeah,
constantly ignored them.
I was coaching the whole time, and still took you forever to figure out, even with all the guys in
Mm-hmm.
the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
You
we'll
don't
circle
like
back later.
you don't like
I don't want to blank
Carla.
on this for
You hate Carla.
Cinder's Carla.
That's your yeah. You
I'm
don't
sure
like
Cinder's is gonna
Carla.
love that character. It's gonna be
Yeah.
her new identity, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whenever she says tourist, it sounds like she's saying terrorist.
Oh, I've only I haven't heard the English dub.
Oh,
So I
you're
don't
on
know.
Japanese, so you don't
I'm
get
learning
that
Japanese.
joke,
I think she says visitor instead. Basically, that's like how it
right?
translates. But I might be wrong. Um, yeah. Do people have like Southern accents in the game, like, or is everyone British? How's it work?
No, yeah, it's some American, some British. I mean, most
All
of the
right.
main characters I'd say are American accents.
I see. Okay.
It's which is weird because most From Software games, I guess fantasy games in general, try to go for that British accent because it sounds more fantastical to Western
Yeah.
audiences.
Yeah, for sure.
Because British people just aren't real, right? So yeah, it makes more sense in that context.
Yeah, they are. It is fantastical. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I like Handler Walter's voice. It's one of those rare Japanese games where the English localization is not embarrassingly bad, so that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I heard that it's like the same like vocal director as like all the other classic FromSoft games. So people were saying
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
mean, some of the I guess the only complaint would be like some of like the enemies you fight have annoying lines. They're just like so fucking out there, but I think that's an intentional design, like an intentional artistic choice to have those characters act like that.
yeah,
It's kind of harkens back to like the classic Armored Core games, kind of, and like the whole mecha kind of like campiness of it. That's like
yeah.
it's kind of known for.
It's definitely like a
So
lot more overtly funny than
yeah,
like
the other Souls
other.
games,
Yeah,
the characters all take themselves pretty seriously, or I guess the creators take the characters seriously, except like
DS2.
patches.
DS2, I feel like is a much more like very obviously trying to be funny in places, but like there are characters with jokes, but like it's smarmy. But yeah, then like 3 and Elden Ring are definitely kind of less like that. But
Yeah,
although obviously we do have crab guy who's goofy, he's silly. You know what I mean?
yep, I know who you mean.
Yeah. Blackguard Bobbert, is that his name? What is his
Bobbert.
Boggart?
Boggart with a G.
Boggers?
We should make that an emote.
I think we
Boggers.
don't we already have that? He's like spitting out coffee or something.
No, that's. Oh yeah, we have Poggart. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, we
I
have it.
completely
We just
forgot
didn't
about that.
we didn't call it Boggers. We called it just Poggers, but it's Boggart Poggers.
I called it Poggart, so that's why.
Poggart. Okay, there you go. So, Elden Ring came out like
Okay, so
6 years ago now, so it's hard to remember what it was
basically,
like when it was
yeah,
first
it's
out.
pretty
So,
old now.
Yeah.
Came out in 1993, classic
Yeah.
game right there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's transition over to our next topic. I want to hear your thoughts on Death Stranding so far.
Whew. I mean, we have been recording for like 3.5 hours, and I feel like
Not
my
really.
thoughts on Death Stranding are, well, maybe only 2 hours, but I feel like my thoughts on Death Stranding are also going to be like lengthy, so we could wait, but it also is fresh in my mind now, so
Okay.
we could do like a quick thoughts on it, but we could talk more in depth about Death Stranding in a future episode maybe. Yeah, I mean, I do think there are parts of it that are clunky and that like the vehicles obviously are like very silly, but I also in general like, I mean, the vehicle mechanics are basically the same as MGS5, and I always appreciated those as being like trading like some amount of like what a vehicle is supposed to do for ease and simplicity. So I think in that sense, I like the vehicles in general because they are just like incredibly simple and basic.
I think my
Ev-
problem is that like they took the vehicles from MGS5, which are like designed for like driving on like paved roads or like
Yeah,
clear. There's very obvious road segments to get between settlements in that
yeah,
game, so it's very straightforward. There's no ambiguity about where you should drive your vehicle.
yeah,
Whereas in Death Stranding, it's like the terrain is just a complete clusterfuck for vehicles to drive on. It's like
yeah.
there's almost no areas where that are designated for vehicles, so it's just a
Hmm.
complete crapshoot about whether the vehicles will actually work properly or not in that
Yeah,
context.
like
And it's just the exact same mechanics as MGS5.
the truck is just not all terrain at all. Like
No, it's not functional.
the bike is much more alter. Well, and also you can do things with the bike you're not supposed to be able to. Like every single time I would like, there were a lot of things that I did with the bike where while I was doing it, I would get the message being like, "Oh, this isn't working." Like, "Oh, better try it on foot." But then I'd just be like, "Nope, we're going on the bike. Just keep boosting," and then we just get up the mountain.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think like it is like uh yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack with it, especially because they just give you so much towards the end. But also, like, I mean, as with many people, my criticism of sort of the exposition is that like I didn't really mind so much exposition during the game because I did like a lot of optional quests, so I didn't feel like I was constantly getting interrupted with like codec calls. You know, like for me, it was like, okay, I'm ready for a little story, and then I would get like a lot of story during the story mission, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm ready for some like, you know, sort of not story gameplay where I wouldn't get any phone calls. But specifically like the ending sequence of cutscenes, it's like I definitely felt like I was being treated like an idiot because there were all these things where they like either heavily implied or already stated certain things where they just felt like they had to like have a character tell you again. Like the whole sequence where you're on the beach, which I didn't mind, like the just being trapped on the beach thing. Like I thought that was kind of cool where they force you to watch the credits. Like, but all the like parts where you sit down and she's explaining stuff to you, like you just had all of those things explained to you. Like you don't need like none of that was like necessary, you know what I mean? And then like
Yeah, it's kind of like I just look at games like Nier, which also have like a very ambitious interpretation of their own stories.
yeah.
Try to use gameplay to explain new emotional themes. You look at Death Stranding; it's doing the same thing, but it's also just like has no interest in being ambiguous. It's just like this is what happened. We're going to explain this to you 3 times, so it's
Yeah.
very clear to you that this is the emotional stakes of the characters that are interacting, so you know for sure.
Yeah, which ultimately like
And
still
I
worked
honestly, I'm
for
like, I
me,
can
but
excuse some of it because, like, on the
yeah.
beach scene when you mentioned like Amelie, it's like that scene is like, for me, that kind of looks like the game is satirizing its own expositional style, where
Mhm.
Amelie is
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah,
will
for
not
sure.
shut up. I
Yeah.
kind of feel like
Yeah, and
that's intentionally
you
annoying, like,
actually can't
because it relates to the theme of the chapter that you're in.
yeah, where you're just stuck. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point. Yeah, it is kind of like making fun of itself.
it's
I
not
mean, I
really an
wonder
excuse
about
though.
that.
It's just like they could do a lot more to make the story have the same emotional impact without really while making the themes more ambiguous and try to let the player figure stuff out for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because I mean, there's parts where like, I think the most successful parts are where it's ambiguous because like a really dumb part is like you get to the very end of like when Die Hardman is sort of like explaining the Cliff Unger
Philip Unger.
story like from his own perspective, and you're like, okay, I've seen all this before, and they get to the end, and then Bridget explicitly says like, I'll raise him as my own, as my son, and you're like, yes, we all know that already. Like that's the entire
Yeah.
premise of the game is that you're her adopted son. Like you don't need to say that. Like, but then the the one of the things that I mean, the two biggest reveals for me were like that the pizza guy is actually Higgs. That was incredible. But also like the funniest thing is the plot hole with the astronaut like keychain that's on BB because the whole first part of the game you're supposed to be thinking like, okay, the memories you're experiencing are BB's memories. Because and the way you know that is because like he gets the astronaut charm from Cliff, and then like at the end of the Die Hardman sequence where they're like replaying that, there's this like interstellar style shot of like the like keychain traveling through space and time to be attached to like your new BB instead of you. So it's like that's just never explained why that's possible. or like how that works, because it's essentially the one thing that's supposed to prevent you from immediately realizing that, oh, these could be my memories, not BB's. But yeah, I mean, I thought a lot about like what is at stake in the game of it being like America as opposed to like any other country. Like, why doesn't the game take place in Japan? Why isn't it Japan? You know what I mean?
I mean, there's definitely like
Hideo
underlying
Kojima's not
themes of
American.
colonialism
Yeah.
in the context of like American expansionism or
Yeah.
exceptionalism and how like Bridges operates, and the game's like trying to critique Bridges and their approach to like unilateral control of like everyone, or like connection of everyone, and like the theme of connection being like a analog for colonialism. It doesn't really work though. I don't think the game like makes enough of an effort to critique these things. Kind of just like, here they are, this is, oh, spiderweb, it's like Bridges actually bad.
Yeah. Well,
I think we're going to see it in the sequel. That's going to be expanded on a lot more, because that seems like the central theme of the game is talking about those things.
yeah. I mean, for me, like, Cliff is the most important character in thinking about that, because for me, it's like Sam and Sam's mission is infrastructure, and Cliff is the military industrial complex. So it's like there is this central, like, sacrifice and like atrocity at the center of American infrastructure, which is like militarism and the military industrial complex, and like the sacrifice of people and other parts of the world.
Also just literally, yeah, just like turning babies, killing babies to make America happen. It's like,
well, and also
like,
like,
yeah, just could not be more directly evil.
well, and the adversary to your progress in the game is always Cliff, and so it's like military industrialism being this like thing that gets in the way of like infrastructure and actually nurturing your own populace was this other theme that I kept thinking about, of like,
Yeah,
you know, those two things need to be reconciled before like you can actually progress and like finish, you know, rebuilding things. Is like, we need to take budget away from like the military, we need to like, you know, whatever. But like,
I'm not
yeah,
sure that's
so,
necessarily like I'm not sure if Kojima is like intending for this to be like a political statement so much as,
no, I
mean,
don't think that's
not
intended,
fair.
but it is what I
mean,
like thought
because
about, you
he
know?
has like a ton of symbolism for political messages in his games, like Metal Gear 5. We could talk all day about how Metal Gear 5 is basically like an analog for Japanese militarism after World War II, with America's like anti-communist agenda overbearing on them. That's like that's a whole other thing we could talk about another day. I have a video to talk about that with. I can send you.
Whoa,
But yeah,
cool.
basically, I mean, Kojima is no stranger to like making political analogs, but I think maybe, well, yeah, I think, you know, it is fair to say that it is about the military industrial complex, because Kojima has touched on these themes before. But I think it's also just like a commentary on his own games, where it's like overcoming violence and letting go of violence as a means to connect, as a means to solve your problems.
Whoa, yeah,
And
totally.
using connection is more just like the more ephemeral theme in the game, and not so much like a direct political statement.
Yeah, for sure. That checks out. I like
Anyway,
that.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see how Death Stranding 2 handles these themes. So I think Death Stranding 2 is going to completely recontextualize the goings on of the first game.
Yeah, I mean, I rewatched the trailer after I finished the game, like immediately, and I was like, okay, I actually it makes less sense to me now that I've played through the game, like, versus when I watched it when I was like early on in the game. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know what to make of any of what I've just seen.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess my other criticism is like, there are ways in which there are these cinematic things that get deployed too often, and they end up like the way music is used in the game, I thought was like pretty annoying, and like part of it's just that I don't really like low roar very much, but I also just was sort of like, I mean, rest in peace also, but I was just like, okay, like the first time that like you're walking somewhere and they play the song as you're finishing the mission, it like, you know, it works really well. But then there's all these times where like they'll just do that again and again, but then like the song will get interrupted almost immediately after it starts, because you'll enter a
it's never
area,
paced
or, like,
properly. It's
you get to the area too fast. But then I sort of had to eat my words, because I thought the church's like Death Stranding song was like extremely sick at the end of the game. So then because I was going to be like, yeah, the music's kind of the one part I don't like about it, but then I think that song's really good. So
yeah, I would have just liked, you know, better pacing with the music. Try to play test these sections more to like make sure the music lines up with what the player's doing when it starts playing.
Yeah,
and make sure it doesn't cut out too early, because it always cuts out too early, because like people are not like going to be walking the entire way; they're going to be running.
I did,
and also just like let us play the fucking music. You have this amazing soundtrack you paid so much money for. You can't let us use it outside of missions.
Yeah.
You get to
I mean,
hear it
it's
once
just,
and that's it.
I mean, having a song come on when you finish a mission, maybe if it was paced better, it would be better for me. But I also feel like that gets old after like the third time they do it. But then also like, uh, it did belie this larger point where I just anytime I felt like I completed a mission with a vehicle, I basically felt like I was cheating and that I wasn't playing the game
Yeah.
the intended way.
If
You know what I
if
mean?
you
I was
want
like,
my honest opinion, I don't think vehicles should be in the game. Like
yeah, I think you're right. Probably
at least for the make the main game. Post game is a different story, but like there's no
like
reason you need to have vehicles. They just cut
you
the
build
pacing
the
in half
highway
and
and
just
you build the highway and you use the vehicle. It's like that's not you're not playing the like. I mean, I did
yeah.
that,
I
but
mean,
like
I guess my counterpoint would be like it's okay because like you never are using the highways to get to places that are like part of the story because all the story missions require you to connect into the car network, right?
mm-hmm.
So it's not like
Yeah,
you can
right.
ever like cheat by using highways, except for like a few instances where you're like going back to a place you've already been to before.
Yeah, right.
For the most part, you're going to places you haven't been to before, which is where you
Mm-hmm.
cannot like build structures or connect things to the highway.
For sure. Well, and then
So in
also
that
like the
context,
whole
it's
sort
okay,
of
but it's still like the vehicles
yeah.
are just like still so stupidly efficient that it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can use them to cheat the missions, and it's like so fast, but it also just sucks to drive because the truck and the bike are both terrible. They're
Well,
not
yeah, and
fun
the
to use at all.
truck is also in so fucking slow too.
Yeah.
So, but anyway,
Anyway,
those are yeah,
there are lots of problems with the gameplay and the pacing and how the cutscenes are recycled, but it's like it's all part of this like central vision of like tedium versus connection, where you have like the core mechanics of the game are tedious, but you use multiplayer to overcome them and make it more stomachable and more fun.
yeah. I mean,
That
ultimately,
works
like
most of the time, but for stuff like the vehicles and the cutscenes, it doesn't work.
yeah,
There's no connection there to the multiplayer mechanics.
yeah. I mean, I ultimately loved it, and I mean, the criticism that the cutscenes are like corny or stupid is like, okay, it's Kojima. Like all of the games have a mix of like, just totally stock Hollywood shit and like really corny
Yeah.
stuff and like
The main
completely
criticism, I
offbeat.
guess, for
Like,
Death Stranding is just, that's just like more volume, right? Metal Gear Solid
mm-hmm.
games tend to have like a more restrained approach to how much corniness there is. The cutscenes don't take that long for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. Then
Yeah.
Death Stranding is like half of the game is cutscenes, so
He
it's
clearly like wanted to make a movie. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But he's like not a movie
It kind of
director.
feels it becomes grating over time with Death Stranding, where a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
cutscenes just aren't necessary to advancing the character development or your understanding of the world or the dynamics at play.
Yeah, for sure. But the corniness, I kind
Anyway,
of just I think is part and partial to like I think that's just like part and parcel to Kojima in
yeah,
general.
I'd be
So that
okay with
didn't.
it if there's just less of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Volume is. I
Anyway,
think you're right. Volume. That's the issue.
we've talked about Death Stranding. You said it was going to be a brief conversation, but it wasn't, as always, as I knew it would not be.
Yeah, I
All you got to do
mean,
is bring it up, and then it just it goes off the rails naturally from there because there's just so much to talk about, right?
yeah, for sure. I mean, we could easily like talk about Death Stranding again and have a completely different conversation about it.
Yeah. So now I want to talk about why did I do Death Stranding twice? Never mind. Yeah.
Oh, that was
I
me.
want to talk
That was
about
me. I put it
games.
twice.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, I'll undo that then.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I
No,
want
no,
to
no.
talk
You can
about
delete it. That's fine. Let's
it's
move
fine.
on.
I want to
Nintendo
talk about some of the
backlog. What
games
is this?
I'm going to be playing in the future.
All right.
So yeah, basically, I got this new PC now, and one of the things I want to do with this
Let's go.
PC is emulate a bunch of Nintendo games
Let's go.
that I haven't played in the past, despite owning many Nintendo consoles,
Super
because
Mario
they were
64.
too hard for me. So yeah, I want to
Super Smash
play
Brothers single player mode.
exactly my favorite game of all time.
It's good.
I want to play all of the 3D Mario games,
Yeah.
all the 3D Zelda games,
Yeah.
and I want to play Pikmin 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Those games look really interesting to me.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, that's basically what I got for now. I mean, there's other Nintendo games to play besides those, but those are the main ones for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I've been putting off the 3D Mario games forever. They just look, they're obviously very polished. Donkey will never stop singing their praises, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've been deprived of good platformers because I'm been on that action game grind for so many years now, and I want to try something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna recommend you a bunch of like old school PlayStation 2 games to play.
That's
at
fair.
some point. Once you're emulating at like that high of a level, then
Oh yeah, I can do PlayStation 2, no problem.
yeah. There's
I
a
mean,
game that's
I have
like,
some
Go ahead.
discretion for how old games can be before, like, because I feel like action games especially are more susceptible to becoming more aged over time, more noticeably than like platformers are.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense for sure. Well,
So
just
yeah,
because
I
like
think
platformers
there's
are
some
more
games
cartoony.
that I might feel like too old to play for me
Mm-hmm.
necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll see.
Uh,
Yeah, it depends on what you have to recommend for me.
yeah. Well, there's one that I've talked to you about before that is basically like it's very similar to MGS5. Like it's an early open world Grand Theft Auto style game, but it takes place in like alternate future where the United Nations invades North Korea. So there's like a bunch of different factions that you work with, and it's very similar in that you like run around with weird vehicles and can like blow up everything. And it's
But
obviously
I know
like
what this game is. What is it called?
Mercenaries.
I thought it was going to be Red Faction.
No,
It's Red.
you could
Is
check
that
it
what it's
out.
called? Red Faction Gorilla? Yeah, I thought that's what you were describing.
No, it's probably not the first game I'd recommend to you, but I definitely think it's like it was like
Yeah.
so many moments of playing MGS5, I got reminded of this game. Um,
Cool. Yeah, the other game that I played that's like an MGS analog was Splinter Cell. I played
oh
Splinter Cell
yeah,
Chaos Theory.
yeah.
That was
How
pretty
was
good. It
that?
had some unique mechanics, but I think it was just like way less polished than MGS 2 or 3 was, which was its
Mm-hmm.
competitor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty cool. Like the lighting mechanics were very sophisticated.
Mm.
It was fun to play through levels stealth only for the most
Yeah.
part. Some levels were like grating and confusing, but yeah, for the
Mm.
most part, it was pretty good.
What else
I'm
is on
very
your
interested
list?
in Pikmin 3 and 4 because they're
Mm.
like I've never really connected with RTS games ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really my thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pikmin 3 and 4 just look so like tactile and and like straightforward in like their approach. It just feels like it'd be very fun to play. Obviously, I'm very
Yeah.
interested in the dog Ochi from Pikmin 4. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
worth playing that game all for just for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna start with Pikmin 3 because it seems like more of a classic, and I think a lot of people who play Nintendo games would be mad at me for not trying that one first.
Yeah.
And yeah, Donkey's video on Pikmin 4 just kind of really sold me on the franchise, so I'm really interested in trying it now.
It did look very appealing. Um, I kind of want to buy a Wii. I wonder how expensive they are now. Uh,
Yeah, you could definitely get a Wii. Yeah,
maybe my sister still has ours. I always wanted to have. I always wanted to get WarioWare. Um, also, like, there's so many Donkey Kong games from
yeah,
Donkey
Donkey
Kong
Kong. That's the
December
other
that.
one. I mean, we'll have to see because
Oh,
like
you got to play DK64.
DK64, Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
Mm-hmm.
Those games all look pretty solid. DK64, I'm less interested in. You've seen
That's the
Donkey's video on it. Basically, it's like kind of disconcerting how much shit you have to do to beat that game, which I'm not really
Yeah.
that keen on. I like Nintendo games because they're like compact and simple. They don't take that long to
Mm-hmm.
finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember playing.
But yeah, I mean, Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze both look pretty good as 2D platformers.
I had Donkey Kong Country on Game Boy, and it was really fun and really hard. I never really got
Yeah,
like that far into it, but it was definitely extremely sick. Um,
the game I'm most
yeah,
concerned about is Super Mario Sunshine because of all the things I've heard about it. It looks
yeah,
terrifying. The
yeah, for
game
sure.
design just seems very obtuse and
I remember being
annoying.
really confused when that came out, just being like, "What are they doing? Like, what? Why? like,
Yeah,
it's Mario, but he's wet and he's wearing a backpack the whole time. Like, he's a firefighter. Like, what is
it's a very
this?
unique idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to have some unique stuff. And I think more recent Mario games have kind of lost that aspect of experimentation that Mario Sunshine had.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not like necessarily like design wise, but definitely in terms of like thematic approach or like
Mm-hmm.
just artistic approach. They all
Mm-hmm.
seem pretty samey.
Yeah, for sure.
But
That
yeah,
seems true.
I'm very excited for Mario Galaxy 2 because those games obviously just I've played Mario Galaxy a lot. I never really finished it though because it's just so long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just it's very fun and it's exciting to play it again with some upgraded gaming skills because I play as a kid now. It's like this, what the fuck is this? This is too hard. So yeah, that's on my horizon right now. I'm going to finish
Mm.
Tears of the Kingdom first of all after I
Yeah.
finish Armor Core 6
Mm-hmm.
because I've been trying to beat that game forever. It's just so long.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy Breath of the Wild. I have a lot of problems with Breath of the Wild, but it's still pretty fun and it's
Yeah.
pretty unique and it's obviously iconic for what it did for modern open world games and making like revitalizing it after Ubisoft kind of shot all over it. So yeah, having Tears of the Kingdom out, which is just like Breath of the Wild, but like so much more polished and expansive and unique, which is pretty great.
Mm.
And yeah, so that's my games. I guess we can talk more about like gaming news, kind of.
Hmm.
Got the Cyberpunk 2077 stuff happening. They've got a DLC coming
What's
out
going
for
on
that
with that?
game, which is
Oh,
like Idris Elba, um,
ooh,
and as
okay.
opposed to Keanu Reeves. That's the new guy they got on. And they're apparently going to be adding a ton of new like quality of life stuff and new features,
Hmm.
which is it's great. But I've always like been on this like point of like, why are they adding this stuff now instead of like before the game came out? Like why is the cop AI just like only now becoming playable and not complete video game garbage?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of new quality of life stuff coming that I'm very excited for because it finally means I'm gonna play and finish this game. Even when I played it like last year, like this was like update 1.6, which is like what everyone says was like the best update for the game, which added the most new content.
Yeah.
It still felt like unpolished to me. So like
Hmm.
this, I think once this new expansion comes out and all the new quality of life features are added, I'm definitely gonna
It'll
give it
finally
another
be
go.
finished.
I really struggle to finish like long form open world RPGs.
Hmm.
Um, I never finished Skyrim either because like these games are just like the scope of like what you have to do to complete them is just so massive, and I just get really
Yeah.
tired of like open world RPG elements where it's like just talking to people in different places. You go in places, talk to someone, go to somewhere else, shoot some people, repeat ad infinitum for 80 hours until the game's over.
Yeah, for sure.
I've always struggled with that. I think Fallout 4 did it better for me because the role playing was so simple, and I enjoyed that because it was just easy for me to wrap my head around and not have to deal with it forever.
Hmm.
But yeah, Cyberpunk is like very much like long form role playing content where the quests just take way too long. So
Yeah.
I struggle to beat the game for that reason, but I'm open to trying it again.
Yeah, even with something like Yakuza 0, like I kind of burned out on that one because like I have the mind like just games like that become like a job for me or something. Like with Death Stranding it was different cuz like it's actually very similar to like the job that I do in real life. So like I had this whole other relationship with it with like work, but Yakuza 0 I just feel obligated to do like as many optional things as possible, whereas the only thing that's really interesting to me is the main quest line. But so then I just get bogged down on like not progressing that very fast. So I almost wish games like this were less open world and had less options and had less like optional shit, because then I
Yeah,
just feel like,
I guess my
you know,
thing is that like Cyberpunk's kind of like sold itself on the concept of this open world. The open world is very beautiful. It's got a lot of stuff in it in terms of like visual appeal. The city is huge
mhm,
and it's very diverse, but it's like
mhm,
when I'm playing it, it's just like so many just like storefronts that you can't go in. It's like so much of the world is just
mhm,
unrealized, which is
hmm,
disappointing because you play a game like Yakuza Zero, where like every single building, virtually every building, has like something to offer in terms of an activity to do.
yeah,
The world is very compact and it's never like grating or badly paced. There's always an activity, and I feel like even in Yakuza
mhm,
Zero, it's like in between missions you can like do activities that continue to make the game fun. Like obviously, if you just do the
yeah,
quest line back to back to back, it is going to get boring because the game is pretty long in terms of its story. But the
mhm,
activities there are like you can just play activities for like 5 hours straight and then do another mission and then just repeat that, and it's like it doesn't really get tiresome for me.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, in
Um,
Cyberpunk, it's like I'm going through the world. And it's like just like you have this beautiful city. It's like okay, you start here. This is your apartment. Go to this other guy's apartment. Talk to them. Don't touch. Don't interact with anything else because there's nothing there. It's just walls. It's just textures that
mhm,
pretending to look like buildings you can interact with.
mhm,
So much of the game is just there's nothing to do there. So it's like very disappointing in that sense.
mm,
And just like the RPG systems in terms of like leveling up your character and unlocking different equipment, they're just so convoluted and take so long to figure out.
mm,
Not figure out, but it's like so long to capitalize on before you can actually like make meaningful improvements to your character, where it just feels pointless.
mhm,
Anyway, it's a very cool world, but I just like I can't really connect with it. It's just way too expansive and huge
mhm, mhm.
and
Yeah, I don't think I would
unrealized.
ever play it. Uh, I think if I was going to commit to like a big open world RPG, I'd probably pick something different. I'd probably pick something older, which brings me to like my like recent discovery is that I've like found this way to very seamlessly on Mac play like old PC games, um, including games that I had on Mac that like aren't available on newer Mac, but like are still available on PC. So I've been playing a lot of like turn-based strategy games that I loved when I was a kid. Um, some
Nice.
like 3DO games, but looking at the library of what's available is like it's so like there's just so many games that are like and they're like extremely cheap too. They're all like, you know, $10 or whatever. So um that like might potentially be like the new rabbit hole that I go down is like old computer games, like old PC games. So if anyone listening has recommendations for stuff like that, send them my way.
That's
But
not really my era. I guess
mhm.
just stuff like Civilization games. I'm guessing you tried those.
Yeah,
Sims.
I have Civ 6. I don't like The Sims. It's boring to me, but
That's fair.
I have Civilization 5, which I like. But I mean that's new. Yeah, not even necessarily for like strategy at all, or I mean just generally old PC games. It doesn't need to be in any particular
I mean,
genre.
yeah. I mean,
I
you've
can
been playing the
probably get
Valve
original
games, right?
Fallout, actually. Yeah, I probably should play Fallout. That's what I should do. Everyone has been telling me that like original Fallout is extremely sick. So, and
Nice.
like fun.
I probably would never
funny.
play something like that, but yeah, it's a bit too niche for me. If you
Yeah.
haven't already, just like play all the Valve games, basically. Those are my PC games. That's my generation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I
just
should check those out.
Half-Life, Portal, Left 4 Dead, stuff like that.
Mm.
Those were all amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure
I
you
kind
have
of went
Portal
on
2
a
on your
ramp.
list.
I think so. Yeah, I've always wanted to play Portal. I have like, I went on a rampage with PlayStation Plus, like I said before. So I have like, I started playing like the Spyro remasters, but I kind of hated them
Amazing.
because the graphics are too good, and they read the voice acting and it's super corny. Now it's the same studio as Ratchet and Clank, and it's the same issue that I had with like the Ratchet and Clank remake.
Yeah,
actually, it's
written for
slightly
children,
different. I
basically.
mean, yeah, like the Ratchet and Clank remake is. I have so many problems with, which we can talk. That's for a different episode, but
Sure.
anyway, yeah. Yeah, like Last Guardian, I want to like play all the way through at some point. I like started it.
It's a pretty
and was
short
having a lot
game.
of fun, but then, yeah, Demon Souls. But I heard they like messed up the music. But we'll see.
They didn't mess it up. It's just newer. I mean, a lot of the music
see.
in the original Demon Souls is like very weird. So it's like they just tried to like streamline it and make it more modernized, I guess.
I see. It's like the
More
same
like
composer's
more like
art before,
cinematic.
right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard it's like
I don't know.
reorchestrated or something.
They just reorchestrate. It's a lot of the same tracks. They just reorchestrated it to be like more streamlined and less weird, I guess.
But
They're
yeah, I heard
both
it's
good in my opinion. And I've listened to them both. I
Nice,
prefer the
cool.
remake because it's more modern, but yeah, they're both fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Anyway,
mean, I don't have the option to play the original now.
We've been talking about all these unique and original games. There's one more game I want to talk about that neither of us
All
care
right.
about. It's Destiny 2.
One more. Destiny.
big
I don't
one.
even know what that is.
Yeah. You don't know what Destiny is?
I don't think so. No. Let me Google it really quickly.
Okay, so it's the game that Bungie made after they left Microsoft.
Destiny game. What do we get here?
Incredible. This is so weird to me that I've met someone that doesn't know what Destiny is. This is like a
Okay.
multi-billion-dollar franchise.
There's like some guys with guns in outer space, but it's also kind
So
of
yeah, basically
fantasy
Destiny
looking.
is like a
Okay.
it's like I think it's like the precursor live service game for first-person shooters. Does that make sense? So basically it's like a game where they release new expansions like every few months or so. So it's like you buy the game and then like 3 months later they release like a new DLC. It's like $15-20. And then they just do that every quarter or so, I guess. Every like half year maybe. This is basically like the game that changed the games industry and started making live service like a more viable business model. Because they realized gamers will just continue to buy expansions for the same game over and over again.
I'm finding
So yeah,
some pretty
Destiny
cool
2 is
stuff,
like
when I'm
Destiny 2 is
Googling
like the sequel
this.
to obviously the sequel to the original, and it's just like obviously they made it because the original game made Bungie so much money. Bungie went from making like Halo games, which are like some of the best first person shooters ever made, into like this super cookie cutter, just repeating the same thing over and over again, live service type thing. Incredible. I don't even know what I'm looking at. There it is.
Destiny, apparently. This is just what I'm getting.
Yeah,
when
that's
I'm,
Destiny.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can watch Donkey's video on it. It's pretty funny.
All right.
Yeah, but basically it's like, yeah, you have this whole live service model, and I think Destiny 2 is like one of the progenitors of modern live service games. They showed the games industry that gamers will buy expansions if they like a game over and over again, just buying new content for the same gameplay. So that's what Destiny is. It's not inherently bad. I mean, it works well. I guess it's fun. People enjoy it because it's like raid content. You play with your friends. It's like super hard, and it's like super replayable. And there's lots of unlocks, and it feels like your character is just progressing for years on end. It never feels like there's like a skill curve. Never feels like it plateaus in terms of content. It will continue to expand upon itself. So yeah, Destiny 2 recently announced like their last expansion for Destiny 2.
Ooh.
Bungie announced the last
Okay.
expansion for Destiny 2. It's like the 10th expansion they've done for this game. And it's supposed to conclude the Destiny 2 saga, I think.
Wow.
And so I guess my question is, Bungie is like this iconic studio in the world of first-person shooters. Well, what are they going to do next? They're working with PlayStation now. They've got this Marathon game coming out, which is going to be like an extraction shooter, which is basically like in the same vein as Escape from Tarkov, if you know what that is.
No, I don't know what extraction shooter is.
Extraction shooter is basically like you start in the middle of this level, this like huge open world level. You find loot. Your goal is to escape the level with that loot, get to like an extraction point, get out, and keep your
I see.
win the loot that you found. But if you die, it's like roguelike kind of. So you die, lose all the loot you found in that level. That's what an extraction shooter is. It's pretty popular now. So that's what Marathon is. It's like a reboot of this old game series that Bungie used to make before Halo.
Yeah, it's like the
But
proto
it's like-
Halo. Halo like has all these Marathon Easter eggs in it and stuff. Marathon's
Yeah,
basically like
but-
Doom. It's like a less celebrated Doom. It looks like very similar.
Kind of, yeah. And so like
yeah.
instead of being like a classic single player first person shooter, it's like this extraction shooter now. So a lot of people are mad about that. But Bungie's kind of known for making these like huge cash cow games like Destiny. So that makes sense that they want to do something like this. I'm sure Sony wants them to do that because it makes Sony a bunch of money. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have Marathon. I'm wondering, is there any other feature for like for Bungie to make something that's not just like a cash cow game? I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea of Marathon. It looks like fun. I'm open to the idea of an extraction shooter from Bungie if it is fun and not just milked to hell by monetization. But it will be, so I'm probably not going to play it that much. But yeah, I just want to comment on that and think about like, is there a future where Bungie makes another game like Halo that's going to be like a huge hit? Because I think Sony wants them to make monetizable games, but also they want Bungie to make like a new first-person shooter single-player franchise that's going to carry PlayStation 5 in the same way that Xbox thought Halo Infinite would.
Is Bungie owned by Sony?
Yeah, I mean they bought Bungie. That was that's like their biggest acquisition.
Wow,
I'd
that's
say
crazy.
In recent memory.
But
you know,
Bungie
I
doesn't
guess
have rights
Microsoft's
to Halo anymore because it's like 343.
No, it's owned by Microsoft. 343 Industries, yeah. But yeah, I guess it was kind of like Sony spitting in the face of Microsoft buying this huge old Microsoft franchise.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, who knows? Like, if there's because like a company isn't anything in and of itself. It's like a company is the people that work there. So it's like we could look at the staff at Bungie to see if anyone who like, worked there at the time when Halo and original Marathon were developed are like still there, or if it's only people who are just there to like do what like Bungie the Destiny people do, like are
Yeah.
But it's also
I mean credit where it's due. I mean the employees at Bungie do care about their games, right? They actually the people at Bungie play all the new expansions of Destiny. They go into parties with people on the game and talk to them and get their feedback.
Nice.
They're very
sick.
on the ground about getting feedback for their game, which is really nice. But I just wish they would channel that energy and that passion into a project that's more inspired and less just monetization hungry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess ideally
Anyway,
you have it
it's
both
interesting to
ways
think
as a
about.
studio, right? You have something that's like critically acclaimed that the studio can like get behind on like an earnest level, and you have something that like makes them a shit ton of money. Like I think they probably want both.
That's what I hope is going to happen. I hope Marathon's going to be that game for them, and also they can try to make a new game that's like more inspired based off of the success of that.
Yeah.
Once they've earned Sony's trust by making a financially viable game, I think they have more room to do something creatively original. Well, I don't. That's not necessarily true. They don't need Sony's approval to do that. Sony bought them because they knew that Bungie has a good track record.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to see Bungie, go back into the realm of single player games and try to make something original.
Yeah, like a new IP that's not like a cookie cutter like FPS. That'd be nice. Not that
Anyway,
I am really
it's nice to think
interested in
about
playing an
because I
FPS
haven't really
on.
enjoyed like a classic first-person shooter single-player game since Halo. I think Halo's the only one I've like, well, that and Half-Life, kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's very few other games I've played that are like single-player games that I think are like single-player first-person shooter games that are like not Resident Evil 7 or 8, because Resident Evil 7 and 8 I
Yeah.
wouldn't really classify as first-person shooters. They're more
Yeah.
focused on like the horror game aspect and the exploration aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I
just
think I'm
having a
like
game like Halo that's like just fun because it's a single player first person shooter that's not just like uninspired or lazy would be pretty great.
for sure. I don't think I'm really like interested in playing a first person shooter not on a computer, but or if
That's
it's going to
fair.
be
I mean, I
multiplayer at
think
least.
Halo worked really well on controller. It was a really well designed for
Yeah,
controller.
Halo on Xbox is good for sure. I don't mind it. I mean, I like certainly played many hours of Warzone on PS4, which was stupid because it's just like
Amazing.
outclassed by anyone on a computer. But yeah,
Yeah, I would like to
but
see.
yeah, I guess it only
I
really
guess
matters if you're
with
playing
games like Resident
online.
Evil.
Like if, go ahead.
If you just need to design it for the player, right? You know, if you design a game around the controller, then it's perfectly fine. Like if you design your single player game around mouse and keyboard, it's going to be too fast paced for most people to handle on controller. But games like Resident Evil are designed like the enemies are slowed down to where you can aim at them on a joystick and it feels fine to do. Same with Halo.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you just got to set your like.
And I think that's what
sensitivity settings or
the new PS5 games from Bungie are going to look like anyway. So yeah.
whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a lot
But
less.
yeah, I definitely
concerned
feel
about,
like I wish
I'm less concerned about
you
like
go.
keyboard and mouse if it's not like if I'm playing single player, it's fine to do it on console. But like
Yeah.
just reaction time is
There's
like
definitely
not.
times where I'm like playing a game where it's like, oh man, I wish I was on mouse and keyboard right now. It's like Last of Us on Survivor difficulty definitely did that to me.
Mm-hmm. Does that require a lot of
Trying to kill
precision?
everything fast enough where they can't one shot you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think we're ready to close this out. Yeah, this has been an amazing episode. I'm really glad we had a lot of great stuff to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the amount of ground we covered, I feel
And
like. Yeah. Never mind. I'll talk to you later.
Starfield.
Yeah.
Starfield's coming out next week. The day before we record next episode. So I won't have that much to say about it, but I will try to give my initial thoughts. And obviously, we'll probably both have finished Armored Core 6 by then. So yeah, we'll give a rounded review of it then, and we'll see what else is on the horizon.
The Horizon Zero Dawn.
The Horizon Zero Dawn, exactly. Actually, the Horizon Forbidden West this time because it's a sequel.
Wow.
Amazing. Anyway, thank you for listening. The two people that made it this far, we love you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.